something is really running.
What up, everyone? How you doing? Welcome to
Hello.
a brand new International Comic Crusaders. I'm your boy Al Mega with the usual suspects here, Mr. Dave Elliott, Mr. Chris Buse, and of course, Dr. GB. And today we have a guest for this 50th episode. Guys, 50 episodes in already for International Comics Crusaders. How dope is that?
Congratulations on 50 episodes. That is really awesome.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Go back and listen to our very first our pilot episode where I had no voice. That was so amazing. I did a podcast without a voice. That was so cool.
Everybody expected, for this to continue the sexy shenanigans of Chris Buse, but turn to something.
Yeah, it's my very white voice.
So yeah, thanks everybody for coming on. Like I said, it's the 50th giant size, and so we have a special guest that Chris was like, oh my god, this is a homie. A social homie. Let's bring him on. And he's a legend himself. So thank you, Mr. Henderson, for hanging out today. And we're gonna talk some comic books.
I'll do absolutely my best, my friend. You guys, it's Jason Henderson. I really appreciate you. I thought that I was a comic book fan, but now I realize that I am just a surfer way in the easy waves, and so I will do my best to keep up with you. But I think it'll be fun.
With me, you got to keep up with these guys. Oh my God, with these guys, they dig the ultimate rabbit holes that not even Bugs Bunny could dig himself out of.
But that's the beauty of comics. Comics is so vast, and particularly when you start talking about comics from other countries as well, no one can be a specialty in it all. So don't beat yourself up. Just.
Well, I what's funny is, oh, by the way, Al, you just put my Twitter handle on there, but it's missing, I think, a single.
The J, it is. Look at that.
Asen.
Look at these
Asen Henderson.
Because we don't know who Asen Henderson is.
Asen is a great name. I probably use that for sooner or later. Asen.
Actually, that's
the from the Trojan War.
And that's also Dirty Bastard from Wu-Tang.
Cool. Cool name.
My comic book, so just to give you an idea of where I'm coming from, my references are generally hopelessly out of date. I came up in Central Texas, around Fort Hood and Killeen, Texas. My typical Saturdays were walking to the comic book store, and I mean, it was Ray Bradbury style. I would walk crossing railroad tracks and turning in bottles for cash that I would then, buy comic books with and read them at an arcade.
Why am I picturing you walking around like the movie Stand By Me?
Absolutely, my friend. Getting newspapers, and this was like the era of the original Book of the Dead from Marvel, the first round of Secret Wars, first comics with Grimjack and the
American Flag,
all that stuff. That is, unfortunately, that is my universe. So when I had children, I just dragged my daughter into the 80s. So she basically, all of her knowledge of Batman goes back to Batman and the Outsiders and stuff. So I'm sometimes I'm hopelessly mired in the past. Is all I'm warning you about.
Well, this show.
Welcome to the club.
You'll be very much at home here then.
Oh, good.
I think it's very hard. I think it's very hard to. I know very few people who have been fans of the same characters with the same passion all their lives.
Absolutely.
It is hard. I mean, now I have a subscription to the DC Universe app, by the way, which I love. I mean, I really love it. And so you can keep up with essentially everything that's going on, and that's just turned out to be really great. I mean, I know I should be going out and getting floppies, but that's how we do it. I share that one with my 20-year-old daughter, and we read comics on
Fantastic. Comics together. That's good.
And you named a Marvel character after one of your daughters, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
You did. Did your wife know?
Yeah. So I have a 20-year-old daughter at Colorado State, and her name is Sofia with a PH. But when Sofia was a baby, I and Greg Scott, who's this amazing artist who you've seen in a lot of like IDW books and stuff like that, because he draws really amazing likenesses and stuff. And somehow or another, we were asked to pitch. Do you want me to tell this story right now? Is that?
Yeah, but Give us a second. El, you can pull up the pictures we have at the end of my
10-second
presentation.
version is, yes, there is a character named after my daughter. But if you want to know how Epic Comics happened and then unhappened, I'm happy to get into that. But I don't want to just take over.
Oh, we're gonna get into it. Don't you worry, because Chris created a nice.
Jason, are you familiar with Richard and Wendy Penny series ElfQuest?
Absolutely, I wrote a column about that back in the 90s. Yes,
I say this without any embarrassment. One of the middle names of both of my kids comes from ElfQuest.
Oh, beautiful.
Did your wife know too? I love asking this question because my boy said he sneaked it in. Oh, wife,
it was my wife's idea.
A fan.
Oh no, my wife is a much bigger Marvel fan than I am, actually.
Oh, dope.
And of course she's like an MCU fan, so to her this is like a funny sort of it's like watching Sherlock and then going and diving deep into research like what are the origins of this character and what how is that character different and stuff. So she came in through the MCU and now she is a gaga Marvel fan. So that's cool. Yeah.
Cool. I think we will have an image from your. That is the wrong one. You need to take not the last one, which is a pitch, not the last one, which is a promo for my book. We want to save that for later. But the 2 pages, the 2 slides before.
We have to fit in that promo for Chris's book every episode.
Of course, we do.
Absolutely.
Once your graphic novels are out there, Dave, we will do the same. And believe you me, I'm going to promote them via Twitter.
Don't you worry. Look what's on my drawing board.
Excellent, sir. Oh, look here. The man is
I'm working on pages right now. So
I just finished the 20th chapter today. Here you go.
Oh, excellent.
So here, Dave
Ellis
still figuring out.
By the way, with Kang, I did a Marvel novel about with Tom DeFalco about 20 years ago. That is now out on audiobook. Weirdly, that's so strange. But anyway, Kang was in it, and they had the Council of Kangs. And one of the gags that we had was that it had literally every Kang from every part of the multiverse, including the Peter Porker Spider-Ham universe. So you had a pig Kang that they ate. They actually decided that it was better. If it was better if there was a little of him in all of them, and they actually killed and ate the Peter Porker Spider-Ham Kang.
You would so get into trouble today.
You're saying the problem with that story is pork? Is that really?
Yeah, probably.
Or as we sometimes say, swine. Yeah.
He was a sentient being. How can you eat him? Twitter outrage.
I haven't even thought about that up until this moment. Well, I mean, I guess so, but they're bad guys.
Sure, of course they are.
It's a council of Dr. Dooms. They're not going to do good things. I don't know.
You said the second to last
American comic book as we know it.
Second to last album.
Second to last.
Yeah. I should have done it the other way around. My mistake. I should not have put Jason's picks at the end. I should have put them up front.
No, that's
my mistake.
Well, I also have this tendency just to fill empty space. So
yeah, that's what we do here. We just talk. We just keep on talking. Look at this. Nice. Wonderful. I love this. This is a very great picture.
That is a cover by Tony Harris. So what happened was, and Tony is astonishing, right? So Tony was doing the covers for an image book that I was doing with Greg Scott called Sword of Dracula. And that was getting a lot of buzz. It did really well. I mean, it did really well for an image book. I mean, people were hearing about it, and so it occurs to me that's what happened with the Epic books. Is that was how we wound up being asked to pitch a new series for Marvel. But what was different and weird about that was that they said to all of us, to every team that was asked to pitch, they said, we want you to create a series and we need you to produce the series. So so you would have a senior editor at Marvel who would be doing that job, but basically the writer or whoever got picked to do this would be the producer. So in this case, it was me, and they'd say you have, I'm going to make this up, $14,000, hire your team and parcel out the cash and and start turning in the work. In other words, it was a way of Marvel recreating the Image production process, although they were actually putting money in it, and that was the difference. Is that Marvel was paying, which of course Image doesn't, and so yeah, and in fact, sometimes I wonder if the reason that actually got killed, it's unclear if it got killed because it was the baby of Bill Jemas, who of course, was in charge but then got fired, or if it was because that model threatened
fired or let go. I mean,
the prevailing model.
It wasn't,
fired or let go, or whatever happened, but
it wasn't Bill's idea.
Yeah. Well, so good question. Do you know anything about this? Like how, if that was the epic model, which I just described to you, is hey, let's give a producer a budget and have him do a book, and I've heard that maybe it got killed because that model was threatening to Marvel. I don't really know. If that were the case, I don't completely understand why it would be threatening. So if anybody knows anything more about that,
So what year was this?
This was something like 2004, I guess, around there.
So they would have still been in some financial problems at that time.
Oh yes, yeah. They belong to Toy Biz, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Toy Biz.
So a couple of years before that, Bob Harris reached out to me and wanted to hire me to run what was going to be a new Epic line, bring the old Epic line back. And it got very close, and right at the last minute, all of a sudden, Bob Harris isn't running the show any longer. Bill Jemas comes in.
Yeah.
And I met with Bill Jemas, and we got on very well. We had a very good initial meeting, and then as we were parting, he was like, "Do me a favor, any chance you can meet tomorrow morning at like 8:30 in Starbucks across the street?"
Okay.
And I was like, "Okay." So we met, and he said, "Look, I wanted to have this conversation away from the offices because I don't think we should be doing this." And now the Epic line, as I believe, was actually Bob Harris's suggestion.
Okay, that makes sense. All right.
Happy Sunday.
So Bill Jemas.
Sunday.
So Bill Jemas kind of knocked it on the head because he saw that the actual Marvel line itself needed a lot of work. A lot of the books were weak. A lot of the books were failing to come out on time, things like that. So he said, "Look, what I'd like you to do is, instead of coming and working for us for Epic, I'd like you to basically come in and get involved with the Marvel line." And I pretty much said that I had absolutely zero interest in that. And he said, "Why?" I said, "Well, to be honest, there's been so much sort of basically bad material over the last 10 years, and it's been very disjointed. The continuity is a bit broken, and because of your financial problems as well, that's impacted that." And he said, "Well, tell me, what would you do?" And I said, "Well, personally, what I would do is I would start, instead of doing Epic then, I would start a new imprint where you're basically relaunching all your main key characters, but currently today in the present day. So it's Peter Parker, but in current times, and has a cell phone." And
are you telling me this is the beginning of the Ultimate line? Is that the?
That's more or less it.
It sounds like.
However, the reason I ended up didn't running that and taking that was because I was also working with a film production company at the time that Avi Arad had his fingers in, and because we were getting, he was actually giving us free options on Marvel IP because he was trying to build us up so that he could make the jump from Toy Biz into a film production company, because that was always his dream. So he actually blocked me from everybody signed off. I was going to do the job. Yeah, we were all going to like, okay. And Avi was like, no, I want, yeah. So he
what I
blocked that.
don't understand is that did happen, right? I mean, they ended up doing that giant reboot, some of which was real memorable, some of which people hated, right?
Yeah.
But so what happens? Like do you think they wanted to have a different kind of control over it, or what ended up happening with that?
The main difference between what I pitched and what happened was I remember at the time there was still a newsstand of some description. Wizard was still doing pretty strong at that time. So my pitch was to do a monthly Marvel Universe comic that was like about 160 pages to almost 200 pages, would have one giant graphic novel in it. Would maybe have some backup stories, some features and things like that. A bit like a companion to Wizard, same format, everything else. So it could sit next to Wizard on the shelf. So the idea is, so month 1 would be Spider-Man, month 2 would be the Fantastic Four, month 3 would be Hulk, month 4 would be the Avengers, etc. And then it would rotate around again. But at the same time, we'd take the graphic novel that appeared in that, print it on better quality paper with cardstock cover, and put that straight into the bookstores for under $10. So the idea was to build up a brand new line of Marvel books. So anybody coming in saying, hey, I've heard about the Spider-Man movie, my kid wants a book, everyone would be like direct them to that line because it would be easily accessible. It was a Spider-Man in the current day, not from the 1960s or 70s, and it would have been easier access.
I've often thought about this, right? Where so we hear about, and it's a cliche now, right? But somebody goes and they watch the Eternals and they go, okay, I want to go get to the store right now and get me some Eternals comics, and it actually turns out to be quite difficult to find the comics that align with what you've seen. And it seems like, to your point, you should be able to have as many really as you want. You could have a 17-year-old Peter Parker and the sort of super buff 32-year-old Peter Parker that we had in the 70s.
Peter Parker, the essence of the multiverse.
Yes, right, exactly. Now it seems like we're getting there, right? I always wanted the backpack, Dave, the sort of backpack form factor that like CrossGen used to experiment with, where you put something at like, so if a comic is, what is a comic, like 6.5 by 7
by 9.5,
yeah, okay. If you made one that's about this, a little bit larger than an Archie comic, you can toss it in your backpack and take it to school and stuff like that, and sell it next to Archie.
Marvel did do that. Marvel did that about 10 years ago or so, 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, I have one of them. I have one of those kind of.
Yeah, they tried it for a while. It was all reprint, mostly all reprint.
Sure. Yeah, these right here.
Yeah,
Throw.
They were actually very popular. Like in the UK, the publisher in the UK of Marvel Comics.
This was $6.99 cover.
Yeah.
I mean, are you putting the presentation up?
Nice job.
Are you putting up the presentation?
It's right there in front of you.
But can we go to the? I see. Can we go to the penultimate page? Is that possible? Can you scroll ahead?
The penultimate or the ultimate page? The ultimate page.
No, the ultimate page is my book, of course. I already told you. It's the ultimate page.
Go backwards. Go the other way. Instead of going, go back.
Which page you want it, Chris? Now
I don't know. What is it? Give me a sec. Hang on. I must check what the number is. Hang on. Just give me a moment.
It was the last couple of pages before.
Yes. Go to 50, 51. Hang on. No, not 51.
While they're figuring that out.
52. Because you have a cover, so it's 52.
Okay. And I have.
You have a cover. That should be it now.
Yeah, it'll be in the presentation, but I'm gonna be like George Jetson.
Can we go to the page before? So it's 51 then.
That's 51.
Here we go. That's so we can talk a little bit about Sophia here.
Well, so Dave's point about what was going on with Bob Harris trying to launch the Epic line, that then became Bill Jemas trying to launch the Epic line. And yeah, that right there, Tony Harris, who had been doing covers for us for Sword of Dracula, he became part of the team, and so he did the covers of Strange Magic, and I believe he did 2 of them. And then what happened was, like, we basically got 2 issues almost in the can. We got 1 issue that these were going to be released as single series coming from Marvel, featuring either new characters or characters that were tangentially related to existing characters. So Robert Kirkman did Sleepwalker. He did a reboot of the Sleepwalker character, and somebody else did a youthful young ancient. It was called Young Ancient One, which is a hilarious title, but it was the ancient one in his youth. And then
that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. I like the idea.
Well, sure, Young Ancient One.
The Young Ancient One.
The Young Ancient One. That's kind of hilarious, isn't it?
And the world was divided between people who thought, on the surface, Young Ancient One is a dumb title because it's inherently, it's ironic.
Oxymoron.
It's an oxymoron. Very good. And others who thought that's hilarious because it's an oxymoron. And that's how. Anyway, so that was done. With Sofia Strange. I did the script. And Stephanie Moore was the editor at the time. She and I worked on the script. We finished it, and then we had pencils and inks by Greg Scott, and then colors by Ed Dukeshire. No, I actually can't remember who did the colors, and I apologize. Ed Dukeshire did the lettering, and Tony Harris did the covers, and boy, we were having a good time with that. And then before. I had the second one scripted, and some of it was already drawn. And then before the first one came out, like a couple months in advance, because people need to understand like how many months in advance you're working when you're doing this stuff, because you're setting up a factory where any different issues are at different points of development. So that one's about to come out, one's being inked, and one is being penciled, and one is being scripted. And they call us up and they say, turns out the entire Epic line is being canceled. All of the books are being canceled. And what we're going to do, fellas, is we're going to take the issues that you've already completed and we're going to combine them into, I think that one of them actually came out. I think Kirkman's Sleepwalker actually came out as a standalone book, but I might be misremembering which thing came out. The rest of them, they said, we're going to combine them into an epic and a thing called the Epic Anthology, and we're going to pretend like that was the plan all along. So we'll announce that and see if people like it. But we won't. But it was dumped. I mean, they didn't promote it, and I felt bad actually. I felt bad for readers who were like, oh gosh, so they're going to do more of these. There was zero plan to do more of these. They were never ever. Going to do a second issue. It was killed with extreme prejudice. It was really wild to watch how somebody just came through with a scythe and killed all these books. Yeah. And I did some Marvel stuff after that. But what Greg and I did was we took the Sofia Strange character that had appeared once, and then we reworked it as a romantic comedy, changed the character up, and so we did a short miniseries at Image called Sylvia Faust.
So just a second. For the cover, Tony Harris did the colors himself, and for the 22 issue, the colorist for Greg Scott was J.D. Medler. Just wanted to fill you in there.
Was who did you say?
J.D. Medler was his name, or his surname.
Yeah, J.D. Medler. Okay. All right, very good. Well, there was another. I was confused because there was another colorist we were working with named Leslie Couch, who I think has dropped off the planet. And
how did Sylvia Faust do, Jason? That's a great title. Nice change of venue. How'd that work out for you?
Good. How do we do what?
Sylvia Faust. How'd that work out for you? It sounds like a really nice change of plan there.
Thank you so much. First of all, we had the best darn time. So Sylvia Faust, if you can find it, which has been reprinted, not at all. No reprints. Sylvia Faust, okay, I can be real for a second here, right? We wrote it and loved it. We did 2 issues of it, and then my partner was still so depressed about what had happened with Sofia Strange that he was like, I just don't have the heart to finish this. I feel like we're doing something where we're just basically trying to do our own thing because Sofia Strange was canceled, and I just don't want to do this anymore. And so so we only did 2 issues of Sylvia Faust, and but what I loved about Sylvia Faust is it was totally different from Sofia Strange in that it was funny. It was funnier. It was played as a comedy, and it had a very strong like male lead opposite her who runs an all-night movie theater, which was patterned after the Alamo Drafthouse in Austin, Texas. So we had a really good time with it. But yeah, Greg was just like, this depresses me to even do. I want to put all this stuff behind me. So that's what happened to Sylvia Faust.
Covers look great.
Yeah, I really like the covers. Very cool covers.
Well, there's many stories in the comics industry of people having scripts, say, placed at Marvel, and for a certain reason they weren't going to fly. Or actually, the one I'm thinking of is an Aquaman script that was at DC, and I think they decided not to. Dave, you might know this better than me. Actually, I think it was it was an Aquaman story that they didn't get to finish, so they turned it into a Submariner story and told the whole thing. Can you tell about?
Who did it?
I think it was Jerry Conway, but I'm not really sure at this point.
I wouldn't be at all surprised. You know, I mean, because
Steve Skeets actually was the writer on Aquaman, I think, who took that stuff to Marvel.
Right.
Have you ever noticed how certain storylines, certain great lineups, will leave like radioactive waves across the industry, and then you look back and you realize it was only for like 3 or 6 months. You know, like the
Jim Starlin as inked by Joe Rubinstein in Avengers Annual number 7, which is where the Avengers, mixed with some X-Men, the Beast particularly, are on their way to meet Thanos. Brown Titan. Bloody, fantastically, beautifully realized artwork for that story, which was spectacular.
You know, I was thinking of the period with, you know, the Englehart Batman when he's like, you know, dating Silver St. Cloud and hanging out and that's only like 6 months.
It was his birthday yesterday.
That run was
what is so amazing about this? What's so amazing about this run is that Steve Englehart didn't have an artist. He just wrote the script, and then Marshall Roger picked up the script and did with Terry Austin did all this amazing artwork for it. But when you read it, you think, oh, he wrote it especially for Marshall Rogers.
Total props to Terry Austin, shall we say? Total props to Terry Austin as an inker.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great series.
So I thought Englehart's master stroke in that was, who could it be? Hugo Strange of all people.
Yeah, brilliant. And they even used the capital letters from the 1930s. For the letterboxes, where they had the circles around the first letter, which they did in the 30s. They even did that. It's so amazing.
And one of the best all-time entrances of the Joker in any Batman comic book, coming off the elevator and dropping a card right out of his overcoat.
That's so amazing.
Yes,
so amazing.
Right. Yeah.
So amazing.
And so the funny thing is that like
what was actually
that like single period, that like. To me, that has affected people's memory of Batman since whatever.
Oh, absolutely. I'd also go so far as to say that period in comics, which we think of as maybe a fallow period, 70s were a hard time in the industry, trying to come back to the 80s, but on some level, a golden age of its own, because those are the stories we're building on to this day. We're still building on that today. You know, as much as the stuff from the 30s is the creation of the character, that particular period, and I think you're seeing it in the MCU, it's a it's a golden era of storytelling in some respects.
There's a lot of Gerber in the current MCU.
Well, I love the fact in that run, Marshall Rogers and Steve Englehart's run was after the realism that Neil Adams brought to Batman and that darkness that was building in Batman, all of a sudden they threw it back to the Dick Sprang giant typewriters.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, and
Deadshot.
And it was so cool. It worked so well. And
I saw that guy, Dave. You like saying that name, Dick Sprang.
Dick Sprang.
Dick Sprang. Jerry Robinson.
What's really funny to me is basically in stories, and this is probably true in the marketing as well. You market something always based on conflict, right? So you're going to come in. I'm just making this up, but you're coming in. You're taking over a new Submariner series. So you're going to talk to Newsarama, and the first thing you're going to say is, "This is not your grandfather's Submariner. We're doing crazy things now," and you're gonna discuss everything that happened before and go, "Bleh, that was terrible. We're going to go back to the original Submariner from the 30s, and you do your thing for 18 months, and then you're gone, and that's played, and then a new guy comes in, does exactly the same thing, and probably says the same thing. We're gonna go back to the 40s, and everybody always, basically, no matter what you're doing, you are reacting to what immediately came before for marketing purposes, purely just to get people excited to go buy it, and you always want to reach back to the original so you can have a pretense to.
Well, speaking of the Submariner along these lines, Jason, you recall that Bill Everett came back into Marvel for a brief time in the middle 60s and picked up Submariner again.
Oh, I have
not a fan of his art at that point. But I know there's a lot to defend his art, but I thought his work was really bad at that point.
It's,
No, you can't say bad. You can say not your cup of tea.
I can say outdated. It looked very outdated.
I would also say that he had prep time when he restarted the title, and then of course had to contend with the monthly deadline, which was killing for him at that stage of his career. But there's some virtues to it.
Have you guys noticed how like with comics back in the 60s, you're talking about monthly sales of something like over 200,000 copies,
400, 500,000.
Unbelievable.
Newsstand distribution.
Yeah. We talk now about how this is the default culture. MCU is the largest brand on the planet.
Well, we could talk about what happened when Phil Souling started the direct market, because as much as it saved the industry in certain regards, it also delimited its audience dramatically. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It solidified the audience to some degree. But
there was a huge drop off. There was a huge drop off before that. I mean, if you look at the Comic-Con sales charts from the early 60s to the 70s, you really see a huge drop off. That was before we had direct market. And what's so mind-boggling is if you go into the mid 60s, the best-selling titles were the Archie comics. Archie comics had 5 books in the top 10.
Lois Lane. Yeah,
Lois Lane was among the top 10. And we're talking about Marvel. Marvel really charted in 60, 66, 67, in chart 19 with the Fantastic Four. That was when they began to chart. They had 4 or 5 years where they were not even among the top 50.
But I think you have to say that when you talk about Phil Souling creating the direct sell market and that kind of ending that sort of era of comics, you can't blame Phil Souling. You can only blame the publishers and their reaction to it.
I was naming Phil as the innovator, not blaming him for anything.
Well, no,
Marvel has been a real how it's dealt with the direct market in the comics industry generally in terms of distribution. But no, I wasn't
dissing. It was the content. It was the content
in terms of
comics,
in terms of commerce. The limitations of which we're still dealing with, which isn't a bad thing. It saved the comic book industry. Theoretically, it was an interim step to getting comic books into the bookstore, but that was more of a cultural and a perception thing than a commerce thing. But as you said earlier at this top of the show, Dave, now we're in a situation where people will walk into a bookstore and say, "What's new?" in the vein of what I just saw, and people can point to that and go, graphic novel shelf, first issues, whatever. I didn't have that back then.
But it also opened the door for a lot of independent publishers to come in. We talked to the Pacific guys here, or one of the Pacific guys here. It opened the door for a lot of interesting comic books to come in.
Absolutely.
Because the economy of scale, you have to operate on a newsstand. You have to have an economy of scale, and there was no independent publisher who was going to be able to do that.
Exactly.
That's absolutely right. There are sliders going on, right, that are changing everything, where you're right, you couldn't have had a Comico or a First without the direct market. But the difficulty is you have this audience of these stadiums worth of humans who visit the direct market, and the other people who don't know the direct market exist, and I'm trying to think, it's a very unusual situation. I mean, if you think about it, like, there are specialty stores for stuff for your pool, jewelry, and propane, and comic books. So if you're somebody who needs comic books, you go to this specialty store. So if you're somebody walking down the street and you go, I remember comic books exist, you don't know where to go because you're not already in it.
Precisely the point. God bless our comic shops. I'm just saying, we've gotten to a point now where how do we open up the venue so that people don't have to stumble upon it or make a point to get to it? It's common commerce. Let's buy our graphic novels, maybe along the model Dave was mentioning, which I thought was pretty interesting. It's a lot of work to do in a given month for a particular publication.
No, it's not. It if you think about it, you're hiring an artist to do a 6-issue series, but they have the luxury of doing it over 6 months rather than it's not all in 1 month. And they wouldn't do the same graphic. Like, you'd have the Spider-Man artist, you'd have the Fantastic Four artist, you'd have the Hulk artist.
That sounds a lot like the manga model, where you have like Shonen Jump or something that collects a whole bunch of books into one cheap newsprint thing that's fun to read on the train, and then they'll later get collected. But that is a really cool model.
One of the projects I pitched to Marvel was actually what they later did with the Essentials was to do a monthly Marvel comic to go into bookstores and on the newsstand, but that would be reprinting 60s comics, but it would basically be Marvel comics, and you'd have like a 300-page black and white comic that would have the Spider-Mans from a given month, all the Fantastic Four stories, the Hulk stories, the Captain America stories.
Absolutely.
Which is how you experience it in the UK, because I came across these rampaging Hulk issues, and even new rampaging Hulk had issue 24, 25, 26, he had in the UK, because they were reprinting X-Men books from the 1980s,
black and white
but in black and white.
Those were so great. I just want to mention the Essentials that Dave was just talking about, that they ended up doing. That they collected, for instance, all the Dracula black and white magazines. Those were some of the best stories ever. They were fantastic.
They're on my shelf back there. So
So, and they had the Hulk, and in theory, these were non-code books that were aimed at a slightly older audience. But I don't really think when push came to shove, anybody really cared about any of that stuff. Instead, you were just writing standalone stories that didn't necessarily have to have continuity. And they were great. I love those.
But I think
those magazines were great.
That was the point I was trying to get across when we talked about distribution, because I think the big change in distribution was also the publishers starting to sort of give up on standalone stories anymore, and like letting writers just like, yes, you can tell a story that takes 5 years to tell.
All props to once again Don McGregor and Marshall Rogers for Detectives Inc. as being an innovative book about, let's do a story that has a beginning, middle, and end, but has an ongoing continuity, has a broad backstory that we can draw upon to bring those sensibilities.
It was a great book. Great book.
Yeah, I loved what DC did with the 100-page Giants. I mean, we probably never have had Archie Goodwin and Walt Simonson's Manhunter without that.
Right, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Those are so wonderful, and those would reprint. They'd have some new stuff, plus they'd reprint things from 30 years before.
Yeah,
perfectly charming. I mean, I have to say, one of the things that I loved the most about those, and I still kind of try to collect them now and then, obscure appearances of Our Man that was reprinted in Justice League 7 or something. I mean, who we heard of that? We'd seen him revived in the JSA, JLA crossovers, but who is this? Kind of strange vigilante, wildcat who comes across a Green Lantern comic book and says, I can do that. I can be of help to my community. Goes and puts on a Halloween costume. I mean, charming, crude, weird, interesting ideas that I think are still have.
That's how they were packaged in Germany, oddly enough. You had the current Legion stories, they were sold in 100-page issues. And you had current Legion stories where they had the disco costumes on, but they also in the back had the old stories from Wayne Boring and whoever did those. And they had these very old-fashioned costumes. That's one. They had these very old-fashioned costumes on. You say, okay, this is from way back. This is from the 50s now.
There's a vogue in current comics. Maybe this is a little dated, but like, you know, Danger Girl, Madman, The Jam. I mean, there's some of these movies too of having what is the implications of someone being a vigilante in the modern days, whether they have powers or not. But the Golden Age comics were entirely based in the notion of citizens putting on outlandish costumes and being of help to their communities, which is why I think that the Minutemen in Watchmen is such a brilliant evocation of that idea.
That's why we have this very, very different motivation. I wrote a column about this with the 40s heroes and the baby boomer heroes. The motivations are completely different. They're completely different. Because
I love the Superman of that era, by the way, who's like, who's, you know, basically, first of all, he's a wisecracking sort of sergeant character, you know, and all he's kind of around to do is find some people running illegal gambling halls and bang their heads together. You know, I mean, he's just sort of, he's a one.
Crushing a glass in someone's hand as Rorschach did. We're going to get to the top of the pyramid in this bar tonight.
Right. Oh, I mean, by the way, Wildcat, Greg Scott and I had the best darn Wildcat pitch. And we never got to use it, but it was have Wildcat be the runner of a bar, like have Wildcat running a giant bar that has like, you know, great like Art Deco surroundings and a big band and all sorts of soapy background stuff, but all the bad guys and all the good guys come through this bar. Everybody comes through Wildcats, and it. I still want to do that story because
that's right.
Like
it's almost like a cross between like Munden's. Remember Munden's?
Reminds me of Grimjack's Munden's Bar.
Yeah. Very much a ripoff of because I'm a writer, so I'm happy to say ripoff. It's very.
What did T.S. Eliot say? T.S. Eliot said that amateurs steal and masters.
I think it's no.
I think Wally Wood said that as well.
No, actually, amateurs mimic. Masters steal.
Exactly.
I mean, absolutely. You know, the funny thing is, to me, seeing the origins of something, that's what makes it good. Like, there's a new movie with Sandra Bullock and Brad Pitt and Channing Tatum. Sorry, and they're
the trailer's a riot. How's the movie?
Right. Well, I don't know. It's not out yet. I don't think it's out yet. But it looks really good. But everybody's like, oh well, she's a romance writer and she's going on an adventure in the jungle. This is like Romancing the Stone. And I'm thinking, we frankly need more movies that rip off Romancing the Stone.
No kidding. That's well said.
Also, that movie came out,
including the sequel to Romancing the Stone. They should have ripped themselves off a little more consciously.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, look, I saw Romancing the Stone probably the same summer that E.T. came out. I think it's
that's something like that.
One, you know, coming out. Yeah.
And it's not a rocket science concept. You can easily steal it. It's no problem. Why not?
Although they might have been wise just to pay some money and make it Romancing the Stone. Just call it, you know, Romancing the Stone 2022. But
Indiana Jones and Romancing the Stone.
Yeah, everybody else gets a reboot. Why not this one?
Don't you find it fascinating that there's never been a successful Indiana? Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm corrected already. I was going to say there's not been a good Indiana Jones ripoff that was popular, but that's not true. The Mummy did it quite well, actually.
Yeah, they did it. And Uncharted is also in that vein, isn't it?
I kind of, well, maybe it's not quite ripoff, actually. It's probably might have even recurred. I don't know. I can't remember the dates. But I always loved Big Trouble in Little China.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, that preceded, did it not?
It's Carpenter. I don't think it preceded.
No.
Raiders of the Lost Ark. No, but
I'm sorry. What?
Raiders was earlier.
Yeah, Big Trouble in Little China was Carpenter in the mid '80s. Kim Cattrall, and that.
Yeah, Kurt
Here's
Russell.
what I want to know: did anybody besides the geeks watch that movie? I mean, in other words, like
Twice.
Right, Ernie Klein loved that movie. I mean, he was obsessed with Big Trouble in Little China. A lot of the guys in that group were just obsessed with that. But it was
so were the producers of Escape from New York. Ultimately,
what's that?
Escape from New York. I feel like Kurt Russell is kind of doing the similar character in that one. I mean, he's
I think it's very different. No, I think it's very different because Snake Plissken is very competent versus the character here is completely incompetent and is saved by his sidekick, which is subverting the character he plays.
To me, what's going on is that Kurt Russell is deliberately, even at that point, 20 years later, is still fighting for people to recognize him as a different guy from the computer who wore tennis shoes and this sort of clean-cut Disney star.
Disney guy,
Yeah, he was also on Silkwood. So he's a good actor. He's a good actor.
Oh, yeah.
Reportedly, the last thing that Walt Disney said before they, sent him on his way was Kurt Russell. He evoked Kurt Russell as something to look for, something to respond. Kurt Russell's an interesting talent, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really liked Bone Tomahawk. It was really surprisingly good.
Yes, he's been reliable forever.
Good to see him in Guardians of the Galaxies, since we're talking about that stuff.
I hate those movies.
Carpenter said that Kurt Russell was the ideal actor.
Get off my lawn.
Because he'd been trained by Disney to, in Carpenter's words, hit his marks and say his lines. He was a professional who knew how to show up and how to deliver, and then let the crew do their thing, and that he was the consummate team member and professional, which you can't get a better, that's the best.
But he's also so good in The Thing. I mean, if you really want to reevaluate Kurt Russell's career, The Thing, his performance in that movie is so outstanding.
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
Which particular movie?
The Thing.
Oh, The Thing. Yeah, it's an amazing performance.
Very, very good in this one.
Again, speaks to what you're saying, Jason, about him being a consummate professional, because even surrounded by kiddish kind of surroundings, his performance is absolutely convincing, very solid. He brings you right into the whole movie.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But he does comedy well as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. Because there was a period of all those Kurt Russell romantic comedies in the 80s when he was just the right age for that.
Yeah.
And I loved him showing up in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That was so perfect.
Yes. Yeah, and he was good in that. By the way, did y'all read I say y'all because I'm from Texas. Did you guys read the novelization of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
You talked about that. I need to read it. You talked about that.
Let's see. I've got it here.
He was also great in Grind, which was that 70s Grindhouse movie that he made.
Cool.
That was called Death.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
He was perfect in that. Yeah. And it was interesting because he played it with a certain irony. He's in character. You believe the character's of the moment, and he's kind of slyly doing this sort of commentary on what he's doing, which is playing an outmoded character.
There's more irony than there would be in the actual movie that it pretends to be.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And that's Tarantino. Tarantino's always going to do his own thing. He's interested in doing movies that wink at those earlier things. He's not
Travolta and Uma Thurman dancing at Rabbit Jacks.
But he has also a lot of love for those references, except for Bruce Lee, which was a little bit off. But other than that, he's fine.
Let's not even start that whole thing, because that could take a whole hour. Definitely not worth getting into. Yeah.
So, Al warned you about the rabbit holes, right, Jason?
Yeah, we haven't spoken about Kang yet, have we?
Yeah.
Have we?
At all. You see what I mean?
We did see Ron the Tut.
I love
it. You want to talk some Kirby here?
Go crazy. Talk Kirby. Yeah.
Here we go. So who wants to start here? I only put the pictures together. I have no idea. I don't know what these books are.
This is your topic. Your topic is perfect.
Well, it's interesting to me because I wonder how premeditated some of these things are. But right here in the first appearance, you have the encapsulation of really the entirety of the character, because you don't know that's Kang, and you don't know what it's going to become. But when you recognize that this is one of his functions, you're like, incredible circle right in the first image.
Yeah, it was Stan Lee who put them together. No, not at that point. But it was Stan Lee who put them together, basically.
I don't know if it was. I think it was probably Roy Thomas, because it didn't.
No. We go to the issue. It's an issue of the Avengers where this is revealed, and that was Stan Lee was still writing that.
Right.
So this is the first appearance of Rama Tooch, and here we get this backstory, which is a very boilerplate. Very whatever. Very boilerplate
from the future.
You gotta love Kirby for just wanting to put a nose on the Sphinx.
Yeah, that's a very boilerplate. What is it?
I mean, seriously, it's a serious point. He's not only evoking ancient history, he's also saying, let's make it right. You know.
Yeah, he's sort of predating the Eternals here, is he not?
Yeah, it didn't.
That's the thing about Kirby. He always had an epic imagination. Whether he ever felt articulate enough, he worked for a lot of writers, starting with Joe Simon, of course. But we can argue how articulate Kirby was in his language, but his epic vision is exceedingly articulate.
Yeah.
I think his relationship with Joe Simon was very similar to Stan Lee, which is, while they may have chatted and talked up some stories, because they shared a studio as well, which he wasn't quite doing with Stan, but he would. I think most of the stories were plotted by Jack, and Joe would just simply script them. It wasn't.
Because Jack's a master of epic, and he's a master of movement, but he's a master of episodic storytelling, plotting, if you will.
Absolutely.
Is he also explaining that the placement of the Sphinx just was because it crash landed?
I mean, just look at this.
Yeah, so amazing.
Panel number 2, worthy of the Watchmen, really, and just in terms of the condensation, the efficiency of the storytelling there.
Yeah, absolutely. He's very, very good here. He fits a lot of stuff in here.
Well, speaking of fitting a lot of stuff in there, one thing I love about this era, and I always felt like that we should mimic it more, is just look how much is crammed into, how much story and how much, as you read slowly and pour over it as a reader in the 60s, so you're going to get to read this comic many times over the course of the week. Yeah. They're very vivid images, but you're skipping long bits of action between, and you'll have all of this time that is moving imaginally.
I think he did it on purpose. He wanted us to make sure we could at least get 2 panels in before the teacher told us put it away.
Yes.
Great.
So
it's also a function of pacing. I always love the camera angle. Look at panel 4 here. So you have a camera angle over her shoulder. If you go back to the page you had before, you had a similar panel where the gun, there it is, right here. Who's holding the camera here? And again, it's not the sensibility of cinema, it's effectiveness of storytelling. It's shorthand.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely. We learned it all. You can always say Kriegstein is the master of the medium, because Kriegstein was the first to say, forget movies. Comics are their own art form.
Their own art form.
Oh my gosh. Let's start citing Kriegstein examples. Fantastic.
That guy
could deconstruct an image where there were 32 individual images in the progression on one page.
I wrote a long column about Bernie Kriegstein, and he became my favorite EC artist in the process. I always hated him when I was younger, and then I said, "Oh God, this guy's a total genius.
I didn't get
of his own."
I didn't get an appreciation of Kriegstein until I was older, but watching the storytelling, going the other way, I'm reminded of Alex Raymond's Flash Gordon, where in 6 panels he would probably tell the equivalent of an entire comic.
Well, I have to say then, for me in that regard, all props to Alex Raymond. A little slavish to his references. I would say Milton Caniff's Terry and the Pirates for storytelling at its best.
Oh, and what I was referring more to is if you go back and look at the Alex Raymonds, you will see where, like, whereas any normal storyteller would, but just going from one panel to another, they might actually be like an entire page of storytelling.
Because you only had one page. That is the amazing thing. They only had one page. That is the amazing thing.
Or his half pages.
And of course, when you're doing strips where you have maybe 6 panels, if you really want to press it, and it's hard to do that in an illustrative strip, you become absolute master of scene changes, pacing, and a single image. Now you have this first panel here. That's a lot of pathos in a Dr. Doom.
Yes. What I'm thinking about as a scripter is just imagine putting this into a script and saying, all right, we see Dr. Doom, he looks dejected, and over his shoulder are 3 different images. And then, but by the way, this is panel 1, and there are 5 panels. And the artist's going to come back and go, are you trying to kill me? Like, I don't understand. Like, can we please just do 2 or 3? Like,
have you ever read an Alan Moore script, Jason?
Yeah. I'm actually not complaining at all. I'm just saying these are
part of the art, right? You convey the information.
Now, the funny thing is, seriously, a heart attack. Check this out. With Greg Scott, who I did, several books with, we would do, I wouldn't even do a script like this. I would do a screenplay script where I'd say the next scene takes place pages 3 through 6. And this is the dialogue in that. And then he would just draw it. And then when I got it, I would then change all the dialogue to fit what he drew. And so I didn't ever say panel 1, panel 2, panel whatever, because he wouldn't do it, even if I did. He just goes, just tell me what happens in the scene. I'll give it back to you. And then you dialogue it. And that was
an interesting way of working. I would like that way of working.
I've also had artists ask me, full script, I want to see what you see. I much preferred the looser approach to it. But, to go through each panel and say, here's what we're trying to capture. Of course, Alan Moore's main attempt with that wasn't to structure it at all. He just write it as if he was writing a novel, really. Give some indication. And let the artist start sketching.
Yeah. Well, like the exception would be if I'd go, it's absolutely important that at the bottom of page 12, they need to be all looking in a certain direction because of the surprise that comes. But that would be it. Otherwise, he would do it. And let me tell you something. Some people loved all that, but there are editors I told this to, and it literally made their skin crawl. They were like, no. I had one who just wrote me back and goes, no, we do not do that. We do not just have a loosey-goosey script that the artist just goes willy-nilly wherever they want. That is not the business we're in. And I was like, wow, I touched a nerve somehow. I don't know.
Wow, interesting.
No, that was the Marvel. That was pretty much the Marvel method. So DC was very, very different.
Which is why it's interesting when you think about, this goes back to some of our earlier conversations about creators' rights. When you think about Jack Kirby working under the auspices of an employee of whatever Marvel Comics was called then, Cadence Enterprises. So in effect, he is a work for hire. He's working under the auspices of an employee. At the same time, he's not just providing illustrations to a script by spec. He's plotting, creating characters. He's clearly suggesting dialogue.
Absolutely.
So where do we come to? Now, Kirby knew what he was doing. He was a mature freelance artist. He'd been a freelance artist since he was a teenager. He didn't work for any company. He and Joe Simon had
There's an interesting precedent. The guy who invented the first internet browser did it at his university. He invented the first internet browser, and he began to market it because it was his baby. And then the university said, "No, we own the rights. You did it on college property. We own this browser," and the court agreed to them. Isn't that
so?
Crazy?
Again, the idea. One of the things that the comic book fandom, the International Comics Crusaders, and everyone who loves this work, working in the industry or just observing it, is to pay respect and regard to these creators.
Absolutely.
This is a page by John Byrne. We've moved from Kirby to John Byrne.
and it moved
the irony is that Marvel Comics was kind of founded on this notion of giving our creators credits. It's a Stanley production, King Kirby,
we know why this moved.
When it comes,
and we know why this moved from Kirby to Byrne. There is a point to this, because this is Byrne. We're talking about giving people appreciation. This is Byrne paying homage to that issue of the Fantastic Four we saw first. This is him paying homage to Kirby in his run of the Fantastic Four, which is using more or less the same plot.
What you should have included is the pages from Doctor Strange by Marshall Rogers, where Doctor Strange's astral form goes back, and he's actually in that original Jack Kirby story.
Oh, really?
Which we agreed you would provide the pages, right?
No.
I'm not the only one providing pages here.
Oh,
when did that happen? When did that happen?
Today.
Okay, so we're flicking through this very, very quickly. This is Byrne, obviously 20 years later, coming in and doing the greatest hits of Lee and Kirby.
Heavily influenced, by the way. You can see it in his storytelling by Kirby. The thing about John Byrne is people think of him as maybe an irascible character, and he does have a very clearly evident style, but he did a lot of variety within that style, and he's another master storyteller. He took a lot took a lot of cheap outs sometimes. How many all white pages and all white covers have we seen from him? He kept up
an my favorite artist when I was a kid. Absolutely.
And I'll say it again for the second time tonight. All props to Terry Austin as a masterful inker who doesn't occlude the work underneath his beautiful pen work and his brush work. All props to Terry Austin.
Yeah.
Only in this case, it's only Byrne.
This is a gorgeous page. Look at that color. Holy crap!
I think Byrne did an amazing job when he first started inking himself. His work was amazing. Then he realized, you know what? If I'm doing this every month, this is a lot of hard work, and started to get rougher and rougher and leave out more and more detail.
You're leaving it to you remember his work for E-Man for Charlton, right? His work for E-Man when he first got started, just stunning material.
Absolutely.
Visually.
The Doomsday was great, but I also love how rough this is. This is very early Kirby here on the Fantastic Four. He even turned the thing back to its original form.
What do you mean?
This is he looks. If you look at the thing, in 2 issues earlier, Reed tried to cure him again.
Oh, yeah.
What he did, in effect, he basically made him lumpy again, like in the early FF issues.
Panel 3 here, you can see again that Kirby storytelling is more than evident, with this character in the extreme foreground looking over his shoulder at what's coming to him. Very good storytelling.
You know, I'm not even sure if people really, like, I remember talking to some librarians who were wonderful, but they were like, I don't understand how to read these things. And I was like,
it's an idiom.
It takes time, because you have to actually read you have to read each panel and then move to the next panel. You know, you have to,
while retaining the imagery of that panel.
Right. You know, it's not hard, but it is a process. It's a thing that you can't just rush through a comic book and actually understand the story that's being told. You have to literally, and there's an art form to reading them as much as there is to writing them. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
But kids can do it, so librarians should be able to do it too.
Yeah.
I think it's Art Spiegelman who says, you can have an illustrated story. We've got millions of those. There are certain early forms of newspaper comics that look just like that, narrative illustrations covering the caption or the caption express. But comics isn't about an illustrated or an explained image. Comics is about the mixture. I think the word that Spiegelman used was co-mix. That's how he liked to put it. So, you have them able to play off of each other as well as play to each other. And you also have body language that is not expressed in what's being described, which is why Alan Moore basically got rid of captions altogether. He got rid of the internal monologue and he got rid of the captions. He didn't need to describe the scene. He relied on his artists to set the scene. Now that's where you're getting into deep comics, because you can read the words over here and they might suggest something, and you look at the pictures over here and it might be very compelling, but when those things come together in fusion, now you're actually seeing layers of storytelling that you can't do in cinema in the same way.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. It's a completely different art. Yeah, it's a red medium. It is a red medium. The medium exists. It's only half existing until you read it and perform it inside your head. Mix those things together and create an experience. So the comic book, in a sense, is not even the comic book. It's the
including the space between the panels, as you mentioned earlier, Jason. We're traveling quickly sometimes. We're traveling as Kriegstein would do. Sometimes we're traveling infinite seconds. Clearing the page.
Exactly. And to our younger listeners, if you know Frank Miller's Daredevil run, and if you love that Frank Miller's Daredevil run, go back and check out Bernie Kriegstein, because everybody says, oh, Miller was so influenced by Eisner. He was influenced by Eisner from the storytelling point of view, but from the visuals, he was really influenced by Kriegstein.
And
could you go back one panel? Al, can you go back just
was influenced by Gil Kane.
Also, I just love this. Is this is that Kane hanging out? Looks like he's got a platter of donuts
this is actually, going back to the 60s, this is actually the first appearance of Kang from Avengers number 8, if I'm not mistaken.
It's been recolored, so you lose some of the Kirby, but it's there, especially in those background figures of the Avengers.
Yeah.
And then what was the next cover? Who was the artist of the next cover? Because that's very much.
That's our researcher pulled this up while we were talking. Thank you, Al.
That was me.
Beautiful, because that goes back to the original Ramatet cover.
Yes.
I love that old, Iron Man with the rivets and everything.
Oh yeah, I think there's a. I think one of the things that I realized, and
Iron Man.
I quite realized when I realized that even early on when my reading experience was, I realized that the comics back then, particularly the Marvel comics, could be like, I would sit there and I would give it a quick look through. I'd do it fast. I wouldn't read every word. I just look through and I'd go like, oh wow, that's great. And I could understand the story, and I'd probably read 3 balloons on each page.
Yes.
And then later and then I would go back and I would read it again. And I found that what you were getting is 2 experiences. There's it's almost as though the storytelling on a visual level was aimed at, say, an 8-year-old, or even less, but the dialogue was aimed maybe at 10 or a 12-year-old.
Well, you could also.
What influenced?
Even if it's very sophisticated, will speak to a person of any age. It's completely visual and it's visceral. So an 8-year-old can look at the Mona Lisa and have a very, visceral response, whereas someone who's much older has a much more sophisticated response, and that's one of the beauties of it. It's not drawn for children. The children can appreciate.
No, but when I say drawn so that a sort of a 6 or 7-year-old could understand it, the basic storytelling was so strong that it was easy to understand. There was, learning to read comics back then was a very easily quick experience.
Yes.
Also, it didn't hurt.
Okay, go ahead.
It didn't hurt that back then there was a very strong.
Al, can you? Oh, he's done.
There was
Chris, are you running the images? Can you run it back one?
There was a very strong influence of newspaper strips. So you'd learn, like, that's just 3 panels. You read 1, 2, 3. Boom. Now you know exactly which
direction.
direction.
Think of Garfield. Garfield, for instance, not my favorite strip, but I mean, it's elemental. There's no mistaking the progression in those panels. Though it's about it is a lot of the time it is key to what's being said. So it looks very repetitive, but it's, again, that mixture where the reactions and the words are, in a most elemental form of storytelling.
But the most interesting interaction I had with comics was when I was very little. I had a neighbor kid who told me those stories. He didn't let me look at his comic books, but he told me. So in Avengers 8, this happens. And this completely formed me as a writer, because I had to imagine everything. That was so good. That was so good. Alice on the pics. Al, can you go back one?
This speaks to what Dave is saying, I think, in terms of just Al, can you roll it back one?
There you go.
So if you look at this here, this is very compressed storytelling. They're trying to tell a lot of story in, nowadays we open up the story so much more than this. But here you have just a very simple image, not even great backgrounds in panel 2 of here is Thor's hammer. That's a very visceral. It's practically about to impact. And then in the next panel, the whole scene's been turned, and here comes the hammer back. Very compressed storytelling. Now, Al, roll it to the next page.
Go back. There's much more. There's much more going on here. If you go to the next page, just what Greg said. What you see here is Kang is not doing anything, and he beats them all. This is very compressed in the sense of here you see how power works. He is not that guy who needs to lift a finger. He just throws Thor's hammer back. And this is the message here. It's so
Go back one more page, Al. Go back one more page. And the scene is set up by him languishing. This is not a man reacting, right?
Yeah. Exactly. He's not taking them seriously.
And you see that in an instant. This is not a man who's under threat. He's not in a defensive posture. He's like, oh, here you are.
He's won the future. He knows he was going to beat their ass. That's why.
I was wondering when you were going
to. I love these poses, by the way. Like, look at the pose of Giant Man and Cap and Iron Man. They're iconic poses, really.
Yeah.
It kind of.
I have stickers of each of those. Just kidding.
Yeah.
And that's Kang doing Kang is doing his best Hugh Hefner right there.
But if you look at it,
absolutely. Those high boots are sexy.
Isn't he sitting on a thing?
If you look at the first and third panels, the Avengers are all leaning in. They're all running towards him, whereas Kang is doing the exact opposite. He's just leaning back. And if you think, and it's almost as though Jack then took Kang and took the exact same approach with Darkseid.
Interesting.
Oh, yes.
If you stay on that panel for just a second, when you're talking about the flow of a panel, typically this is how we're reading. So this is a forward motion. Notice that this is taking us into the next panel as a forward motion, going into the deep background. This panel is going the opposite direction. And what is he trying to represent there? He's showing you the tension of resistance, new information, and where do we go next? Well, we have to turn into the action. It's elemental, but it's beautiful, beautiful storytelling.
Yeah, and he did it all by instinct. He never had any proper training. I mean, this is just instinct. This is Jack doing this on instinct.
All right, can I ask a question?
He probably read his share of Alex Raymond.
Sure, Jason.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry. But I imagine you guys will have an opinion about this. I want to go back to Dave made the excellent point. He was like, the storytelling can be understood by almost anybody. The basic storytelling, the continuity, plot, characterizations, and all that stuff can be understood by older minds. However, maybe because of the comics code or maybe because of whatever, everything stays at a certain, what we would today call a certain MPAA rating, where everything's at more or less a PG
Some
rating.
would say Arrested Development, yeah.
Sure. And so, but my question is, I actually really did, I liked it when that was the default, when certainly you could go in, grab a detective comic, and that I could give it to my 8-year-old nephew and he would be good to go, and I think the direct market disrupted that, but I don't know, I don't know what the answer is, because as we've continued to make comics more for the hardcore comics fans, who are all now people like ourselves, people of a certain age, so that we might need, or at least enjoy, or at least want a more sophisticated, sexy, violent kind of story. It means that becomes the mainstream and the default.
What I find so interesting, just to piggyback on this idea, this is what a 13-year-old Jim Shooter read, and he said, okay, this is the Marvel comics. Yes. Now I will bring this over to DC Comics, and what 13-year-old Jim Shooter, who knew life, who came from poverty, understood is tragedy and melodrama. And he was the guy who brought death to the DC universe. All of a sudden, kids who were reading the Legion of Superheroes learned that Pharaoh Kid could die and he would not come back. He would stay dead. And that a 13-year-old kid wrote.
Iron Man.
It's amazing. It's so amazing. It's so amazing. Yeah, but it doesn't matter if he's an Iron Man character, but he died. He sacrificed himself. Kids learn.
It's an interesting thing, Jason, because you're talking about the insularity creatively of the industry. And, on one hand, when you create a specialty shop so that these things can be available rather than going to a pharmacy or you can go to a comic book store, but it creates a commercial insularity, and comics have largely been, commercially insular, at least since the Comics Code. But they've also created storytelling, a cultural insularity, an industry insularity. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you can then do these innovative metafictional things. But there's no better expression of the difficulties the general populace would have. And one of the joys they're missing is this concept of a multiverse. It's very detailed and crazy, and at the same time, it's very tasty. It allows you to bring in so much other continuity that you might have lost or had to discard. I mean, I think of the new Spider-Man movie, 3 different Spider-Man in one movie from 3 different epochs of storytelling, but somehow, a better example is Into the Spider-Verse. They made that work. Now, that's very abstruse and sad. DC seems to think that they keep playing their Infinite Crisis to their audience, but they have to refresh that. And Marvel understands that. Marvel has been able to take the multiverse and refresh it.
Gregory, I just wrote and then told my editors to kill because I didn't want to piss anybody off. But I just wrote a column that ran like 1,000 words. And it was called The Dark Knight Returns was one of the greatest comics of all time, and the adoration of it has ruined Batman. Because it worked as irony. It worked as, oh my goodness, how interesting to see this character created for fucking children in the 40s. What if he were dark? Ooh, what if there were dark rain? What if he were violent? How crazy. And then, but that's become the default expression. And so we've lost the notion that you can also have friendly Batman throwing back his cowl and drinking coffee with Superman in World's Finest, or Batman as a pissy team leader in Batman and the Outsiders. We've lost all of that.
Basketball.
Yeah, but can you imagine, Jason? Can you imagine today if I was to do a Care Bears comic where they were gutting each other, one was raping the other one?
Well, unfortunately,
the Care Bears are directed at
You can imagine this.
And it's not going to send that plane. Batman has a very wide and varied audience. I mean, just to make
but you see, the problem is, and because unfortunately we're a bunch of fanboys talking about it. If you actually step back and imagine yourself as someone who's more a pedestrian, more someone who you might say is more mainstream, I would look at it this way, in that, and I think this is one of the issues you still get, maybe not as much as you used to, but hey, I used to buy Batman comics when I was a kid. Sure, yeah, I'm going to buy my kids some Batman comics. And you buy some Batman comics, and then after he's read them, you read them, and you go, "What the fuck did I give my kid? He's fucking Catwoman."
May I elaborate on that
Bed penis. Bed penis. Bed penis.
My daughter who's having a birthday, and she said that her favorite toy was My Little Pony, which I had not really heard of. Oh, My Little Pony! I'm gonna go get that 5-year little girl a birthday present of My Little Pony, no problem. And I went online and I called up My Little Pony, and what I saw was not for children.
I know.
I was like,
That's adult
fan art. That's adult fan art. That's a completely different fandom.
But shocking in the same way. Like, what is going on here?
But I think I think it's something that's very American, and we're basically, these are all corporate owned.
Yes.
And so by
what sells is what you're saying.
Huh?
What sells? Frank Miller.
No, it's so what you have is what we've seen over the last 40 years is efforts, and we've seen it from both Marvel and DC, particularly from Marvel, where they will crush other opportunities for other publishers to grow in order for themselves. And where a new publisher might have produced something new and independent, what you've had instead is more Batman, more Wolverine, more Spider-Man.
Marvel's notorious for that.
And basically what it does is you're gushing
for their own benefit.
Yeah, but you're gushing over the multiverse, and yet, yes, it's cool as fanboys. Like, oh yes, the three. Oh, look at that, the three.
Gushing over it. What we're talking about is an expression of the insularity.
But the problem is we're doing that. But just imagine what we might have had if, I'm probably gonna. This is kind of more into the way that the way corporations run our entertainment is. They don't want creators to have any ownership or any right, and they're not going to put any effort into anything they do. Like even like you look at DC doing having another go at a Milestone line. The first time round, if they'd actually put as much effort into it as their own line, it would have probably lasted a hell of a lot longer.
Although there might be more of an audience for it now.
Yeah.
Really? I mean,
there's been really. There's been a big market. And what you're talking about, Dave, is these are corporations that are looking for where is the money.
But you see,
Power Man, who has become an interesting character, that's part of the blaxploitation movement of the 70s. I mean, clearly, Black Panther in himself is a character that comes out of that, addressing a popular meme that actually has a commercial appeal. So I mean, that is the comic book.
Well, I would say I wouldn't compare Power Man and Black Panther, because Black Panther, I think, was created by Jack Kirby because he actually genuinely believed that there should be representation for his fans.
Same era,
absolutely.
To the era is my point.
But I think Power Man was probably a little
Power Man was much later.
Yeah.
And also the name, they didn't take the name 70s. Because the name
Power Man's early 70s. That's still the Black Panther.
No, but Black Panther, when the Black Panther was created, they didn't even know the name existed in the movement. So they were even ahead of this. Yeah. And so so it's not that they took the popular name at that time. They were even before that.
And I was actually talking about the cultural moment of the emergence of Black Power.
Well, it was even before that. It was even before that. And before that, Jack Kirby put a black character into other books. He was Dave said, he was really interested in
organization. But I'm talking about
he didn't.
Cultural meme. The civil rights
was
really
before.
Started in the United States in the beginning of the 60s. So
not the Black Panther movement.
The rise of Marvel Comics as we know them. So
absolutely true.
It's
different.
Responding to the cultural moment.
I think Kirby and Lee were responding to the civil rights.
We're coming up on 90 minutes. I actually probably should go and get some work done, and I apologize.
Actually,
okay, no problem.
Hold on.
Dave wants to say something.
Jason, it's been absolutely a pleasure having you here. That was a bit of the rabbit hole, just skirting the rim of it. Thanks for pulling us back.
So I think we need to give Jason a minute to just give us some, like, what else are you working on right now? What are you up to?
Well, I co-publish a publishing company called Castlebridge Media, and we do original novels as well as a very popular horror anthology series called the Castle of Horror Anthology. So right now, what I'm doing, like today, is reading a bunch of submissions for our next version, which is Love Gone Wrong, stories about love, and then later in the year, we're hiring a well-known LGBTQ artist to be the editor for an LGBTQ plus horror anthology, and so that'll be cool. But other than that, I have a book about tiki culture due in March, so I'm working on that. I'm busy all the time, but it's good.
Can you actually, when I was looking you up and I went onto Amazon,
yes,
I must admit I was fascinated by the young Captain Nemo, because I love stuff like that when you play in the public domain area
yes.
and you skew off. So
There's no difference between what I did with Young Captain Nemo and what fanfic is, except for that I got paid to write Young Captain Nemo.
What about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen? Is that fanfic? Is that public domain fanfic?
Exactly. Yeah, precisely the same. So with Young Captain Nemo, that's a series of novels, science fiction about these young people who have a submarine and save the planet and get into adventures. And we did them through Macmillan Children's Books, and that series has been optioned for film by Kinsane, which is this big Indian media company. And so I'm hoping for the best for that. They've already got the screenwriter is Jeffrey Reddick, who's the creator of Final Destination, is currently writing the new Usagi Yojimbo series on Netflix. Wow. So we're hoping good things will come from that. That was the second series like that, Dave, because I had one called Alex Van Helsing, which is also about
I saw that as well. Yeah.
So there were 3 of those novels and 3 of the Young Captain Nemo novels. And
are they going to meet?
We could. The great thing is if you still own the property, I could make them meet if I wanted to. So,
I have to get to Transylvania quick.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me cross the Atlantic in the Nautilus. Yes.
And do some damage on the way.
I'm sorry.
And do some damage along the way.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'd love to see the Nautilus interfere with Dracula's ship coming into London Harbor.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and so it's funny because I could do stories that went back in time into different activity of the Nemo family. But I don't want to bore you with the ridiculous Nemo continuity that we have in these books, because it's as deep and wide as any fanboy would make his own universe.
So you're going to bring in some little Nemo memes into that, Jason?
The which?
You're going to bring some little Nemo memes into that? That's public domain.
That's actually a really, really good idea. But these are straight up novels, so I would have to just make references. But I did some. I even planted some Easter eggs that are related to the Alex Van Helsing novels.
Well, it's a popular trope to end up at a carnival. So there's your tie-in right there.
Yeah. We also Chris reviewed Night of the Bookman, which is a 1950s demon hunting story about a surfer girl. And I actually have hired a new writer to write the next book on those, because I just don't have time to work on it. So she's taking it over. I'm sure she's going to do better than I did, because I'm getting more into writing to the extent that I have time to write. I'm getting more into writing thrillers. So I just wrote one called 18 Miles from Town, and we optioned that to movies. And then and so now, as soon as I finish with the Tiki book, which is due to the History Press in March, then I'm going to turn back to writing more thrillers. So that's it. I just blathered a whole bit. There's no way anybody could remember anything I just said. So
no, excellent. But we have to link to your page here and check it out. And highly recommend it.
Thank you.
And check out the Castle of Horror podcast and Castle Talk, of course.
Oh yeah, indeed. I interview lots of crazy people on Castle Talk. I've talked to Chris. I've talked to Joe Bob Briggs. I've talked to Elvira. I mean, we've done really neat interviews, and I love it. I really love it. Thank you guys for indulging me. I appreciate it. You're asking.
Thanks for coming here. Excellent. Hanging out with us
geeks here. Open door, brother.
It was really fun. Really, really fun. Yeah. I feel definitely outdone by how well you guys know your material. So good job.
All
right. I'll see y'all soon. Bye.
Take care, Jason.
Bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, but the rabbit host scared the hell out of that guest boy. Now.
Dave and Greg are becoming like the old guys on the Muppets all of a sudden.
All right.
You figure it out, El.
Oh shit, bro! Don't make me start making up some pictures for the next team. All right.
Oh yeah.
Let's start digging in, though. As the point. So, is this the first time we see him as Immortus?
This is the first time we see Immortus. Period. They haven't figured it out yet, but this is the first appearance of Immortus, which comes 2 issues later or 1 issue later. I haven't.
But how much later is this between?
Immortus gets folded in much later. First, they fold in Ramatud and Kang, which happens in the next Avengers issue.
So, who are we looking at in terms of the artwork, Chris?
That's Don Heck.
This is Don Heck.
Don Heck, inked by.
I have to look it up. I don't know that. Dave probably knows.
It may be Mike Esposito.
I can check it up. Hang on a second. We'll see.
Wally Wood did a couple of issues of the Avengers over Don.
Yeah, but that's later. That's later.
Yeah, those are beautiful.
Those are amazing. And Romita also did very nice inks, as we will see in a minute on Heck. Which
you can
really
definitely see it in that fourth panel.
Great cover.
That's beautiful.
Let me just go back here.
Cover, man. Look at it.
Oh, I hate this side here.
So is that him inked?
That's Jack Kirby inked.
Give me a second.
Coletta inking
Hang
job?
on.
Who?
I'm opening it up. Hang on a second here.
Vince Coletta. One of
Coletta.
No, that is. Hang on.
It might be.
No, we're looking at another cover, Chris. Don't
So that's John Romita. That's John Romita inking.
Right.
That's Romita inking Kirby?
Yes, and
that's why it looks so much. It's beautiful.
And
yes, the brushwork on the
Isn't that
particular,
amazing?
like, star in the background.
Yeah. And on the sleeves, are you loving that? You know, I see Frank Miller in this. You know, when you look at Sin City, you can see Frank Miller going, "What if I just did this with brushes?" You know.
Exactly.
I mean,
and the inker on the previous issue was hang on, Dick Ayers.
Dick
Ayers, nice.
Dick Ayers inking Heck here.
He used to ink a lot of Kirby's Western stuff. Beautiful material.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he did. So this is Dick Ayers here, and this is Kirby on Romita.
You know, you are mentioning the sleeves on Kang. You know, is he from the future and they don't have irons? What happened? I mean, I would have.
Hey, maybe it's stylish. You know, maybe he's got.
It's very stylish. It's very stylish.
He's the king of the universe, after all.
Oh,
yeah.
That helmet looks like one of those diving helmets from back in the day.
Yeah. So now, does anyone actually know, like currently as it stands right now in the Marvel universe, at least the comics anyway, is Kang Immortus and everybody else, or how does it stand? Has he been separated off? Because at one point he was all of them. Like Kang was.
Maybe that's what Timeless is going to explain.
Kang was Doctor Who. So
probably not going to put all of that in there at once. You know, you can see like in panel 2 here, Kirby loves imagery, of course, and he's a mythologist, so he studied a lot of the world's imagery. And I think you see here an intimation of what became pretty prominent. He was really into Mayan imagery.
But this is Don Heck on John Romita.
Yeah.
But it's Kirby's character design, I guess, is my point.
Right.
You took it, yes, of course.
Oh wow! Look at this panel work here.
And look at how Romita the faces are.
Yeah. Yep. He probably spent more time inking the women's faces than the rest of the page.
Absolutely.
Well, he did a wonderful job.
He did start out as a romance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. And then you can see that Scarlet Witch's head doesn't look as ridiculous here when you see it.
I love the tension in Hawkeye. You can even see he's kind of arcing and he's struggling with his quiver back there. He had good body language.
Are you sure it's his quiver? I think he's like his tailbone. He just got dropped right now.
That is quiver right there underneath his shoulder.
Yeah.
But this is still my favorite Avengers team. Those 4. This is absolutely my favorite Avengers team because I don't like these because I like that they are downtrodden, that they are on the loser side, that they are the underdogs, not these overpowerful people with Iron Man, Thor coming in. You need normally they would fight here street level crooks, and now they're fighting these gods from the future. It's so amazing.
And both Wanda and Pietro have that kind of oppressed mentality that they're coming out of as well.
Definitely.
You've also got someone like Captain America as basically being the leader. The strong, passionate leader.
While he's lusting after the foreign girl who's all wrong for him, which is quite interesting.
You would think that Tony Stark, and I think they play with this in the MCU a little bit. You would think Tony Stark would be the obvious leader because he's the funder and he's intransigent. But I think what Stan Lee really showed in the Avengers is Captain America is a natural-born leader. Period.
Absolutely, we agree totally.
Oh,
because he's selfish. He is selfish in ways Tony isn't.
Well, there's like everybody loves doing that. If they're doing the Avengers, or even if they're doing Captain America and they get to guest star the Avengers, everyone loves doing that shot of Captain America standing there and just telling Thor and everybody else what to do. Like he's the guy that tells Hulk what to do, and Hulk listens.
But he's not a general. He's not a major. He's a captain of men.
There's that great issue of Daredevil.
So well in the movies.
There's that great issue of Daredevil that was drawn by Dave Mazzucchelli, where you've literally, like, you hear it, you hear the thunder, and then you look up, and there's Captain America standing there, and it's raining, and he's commanding the god of thunder.
Well, even in the MCU, when they had the instance where Captain America wielded Thor's hammer, an interesting comment on him as a character, not a character, his character.
Yeah, his values, core morals and whatnot, to be able to, be worthy enough.
I think Byrne played with that a little bit too. Wasn't there an issue of Captain America where he was running for president? I don't think Byrne wrote that issue. Like that, I think Roger Stern might have written that issue.
Yeah.
But the whole implication of Cap dealing with an America that he fought for, but is not what he fought for, and Captain America wondering whether he can be effective in bringing those values as a political entity as much as a servant.
And there we have a little bit Service Jim art.
Yep.
Also very underrated artist.
Who's this?
Bottom panel.
Service Jim.
Salvasema, yeah. He's a great storyteller as well.
Sam Granger.
Very good, yeah. They work well together.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Sam Granger worked really well on the early. He did a couple of issues of Barry Smith's early work for Marvel.
Oh yeah. I love those issues.
Yeah.
Wow, this boy got a big head or what, son?
Yep. Taskmaster.
Looks like the Guardians from Oa grew up.
Right?
They used him. Didn't they have him in the third Thor movie? Was that or Taskmaster? The character
Grandmaster.
Grandmaster.
That was Grandmaster. Oh, that was Grandmaster. Okay.
Yeah, this is Jeff Goldblum, right?
Yeah. Check him out, yo. No wonder he got a big head. And they chose the right guy to play him.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
How about Henry Pym's July effect, though?
And okay, now we're on the Rita pass here, and this is where we introduce the multiverse into Marvel Comics, I think.
The multiverse.
We have the parallel Earth, and we have a parallel Justice League coming in right now here.
We should start calling it the M-word.
Yeah, you're talking about the Squadron Supreme?
Exactly. Which is basically Roy Thomas doing the Justice League in Marvel Comics. If you go to the next page, we should.
And then Mark Waid did Squadron Sinister.
I love it. Yo, look at that.
Yeah. No, it's Mark Grunwald who did the Squadron.
I'm sorry,
right.
Yeah, James did also a great run on this.
I mean, for people who are in the know, when you guys read this, were you like, dude, Justice League completely?
Right.
Yeah,
I think when I read it the first time,
he brought in the Invaders. He brought in the Invaders because that's also why Thomas loves to go back to the 1940s.
Oh yeah, you remember the issue where he had? I think it was when he was dealing with Kang, and he brought in Frankenstein's monster, and he brought in. That was a great run.
That was not Roy Thomas. That was Steve Englehart.
That was Englehart. Yeah, I'm a big Englehart fan, as it turns out.
We'll get to Englehart in a minute.
I love
the original Human Torch. Basically, the All Winners gang.
Oh, and Black Knight, which is I'm gonna tease the period.
And we got the name Endgame here in an Avengers comic. Ooh. Hello.
Stan Lee, Roy.
Now that's a beautifully composed. It's not super detailed, but that's a beautifully composed page.
There goes Kang again, pacing. He's always pacing, bro. Always up to
he's not so
I love anymore, coming across the page into the action, and then the final panel, these are coming straight for us.
Right.
And I'm also sure Paul Dini paid close attention to this one because this is very much Mr. Freeze and Heart of Ice in the animated series.
What issue is this, Chris?
This is in the 70s. This is in which is I can look. Hang on a second. I will have to.
Can you roll back one now, just for a quick second?
Just a second. That must be 71, 72, something around that time.
Yeah, this thing is in the way for the slide. This slide, I got you. Hold on, guys.
Avengers 71. Avengers
Yeah, 71. That's
Got it.
71. Yeah. That's 71.
There you go.
So this is still very early in the Roy Thomas run.
69.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
Yeah,
Oh, that's
69.
fantastic.
isn't this dope?
That's so good.
Beautiful. Just beautiful.
That's my favorite version of the Iron Man right there. Suit. And there it goes, man.
And this is we're going into the Engelhardt run here right now. This is now 130 it is. And with what you see here, Mantis is coming on to everybody on the team. And I had this tweet on Twitter and everybody, oh no, Mantis in the MCU is great. No, forget this shit from the MCU. This is the real character, the way Steve Engelhardt conceived her as a powerful woman, as an interesting woman, as a prostitute who has her own mind and she knows what to do. Forget that MCU shit.
And significantly
James Gunn shit.
Significantly.
Exactly.
I think that's an important thing to remember.
Very, very much in control of her sexuality.
Gorgeous cover once again. Look
Mhm.
at it.
Now, in the teaser, it said "kiss tomorrow goodbye." Here it says "bid tomorrow goodbye." Much more in the Marvel mode.
It looks like a Ron Wilson cover.
Can look it up. Hang on, I have it open.
Inked by
Swordman stuff there. They kind of made him jokey in Hulk and
The swordsman.
Swordsman, yeah. Swordsman.
So Swordsman becomes the hero in this story, which is very interesting. And he
That was the
dies.
fun thing about Avengers. You know, they'd have a rotating cast, but they would throw in these random, interesting, minor characters and really make them central. Really give them good play.
Exactly.
Well, he was in
Also,
TV series.
Dave is also was right on the money. The cover was by Ron Wilson and Milgram. Right on the money.
Hey, bro.
Perfect. Yeah.
Fucking Dave,
Amazing.
The artwork up on the screen at the moment is
No. Okay. Go.
the artwork up on the moment is Sal Buscema inked by Joe Staton.
Yeah, you're totally
Seriously,
correct.
just state this.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Joe Staton
I was surprised too.
Joe
I was
Staton
really
inked
surprised.
Sal Buscema quite a bit for Marvel during this period.
Yeah.
He did some Hulks
Yeah.
together as well as some Avengers.
And it looks very good. I'm not a big Joe Stanton
loves
fan,
it.
but he looks good. He looks good here.
I think Stanton. I think he had some good material. I think he just got so rushed.
Mm-hmm.
Stop.
There's a I'm trying to think of Joe Staton was inked by George Freeman on an issue of Brave and Bold.
Oh wow.
It was absolutely gorgeous. Like, talk about
Bet.
two artists complementing each other. If you could have had Joe Staton and George Freeman as a team on any book for a year.
Well,
I'd
you know,
have
they
quite
put
bought it.
Staten on All-Star Comics when they revived the Justice Society, and his initial work seemed pretty good, but him and Bob Layton, it's like they just splash dashed it, just threw it out, and it was a disappointment because the first couple issues, and what's the special they did? The artwork was spectacular. They really took their time with it, and it looked great. But when they rushed it, it got really sloppy really quickly. And I think that's one reason All-Star Comics actually ended up failing. The artwork was so slapdash.
Well, I think, again, it's like, as an editor, you have to look like Joe Staton, when he inks himself, is a brush guy. So if you look at, and he pencils, presuming he's going to ink it himself with a brush.
Pretty loose.
Bob Layton is a pen guy. Mostly pen. So it's going to be a much stiffer look. Whereas George Freeman, when he inked him on Brave and Bold, again, brush guy. Very lush, nice, fluid line.
George Freeman did some spectacular work on a kind of a second-rate feature, but Captain Canuck, believe it or not, he did some really
don't call that second-rate, mate.
It could have been written better. It could have been written better.
Hey.
No offense.
Hey, George Freeman's run on Captain Canuck was absolutely like
Beautiful stuff.
Yeah, it was
Gorgeous.
great, and he did some great work, and he did a wonderful Mr. Monster book with Michael Gilbert.
All right,
That's right.
guys. And I asked though, is this the first time we get the connection of Kang and Rama?
No, we got that before. I think we skipped that page somehow, or we flipped through it so quickly. It was earlier. We already saw
They
that.
did have him announcing himself. I think it's the next one. There he is. That's a great upshot, by the way, of Kang, huh?
And this is Dave Cockrum. This is Dave Cockrum, the inking Dave Cockrum. I mean, this looks amazing. I'm not a big fan of his X-Men work, but this looks amazing.
Cockrum
You don't
Here
like
see
that
again,
Cochrane's
King
X-Men
lounging.
work?
No, not so much.
Oh,
Well,
damn.
I absolutely love his Legion work, but I'm not a big fan of his.
Al, where did you find this guy from?
Secrets are coming out today, folks.
We'll go
No,
back
but-
again to the
No,
beauty of
it's-
having
it's-
a really
I think
fine.
he had the wrong inkers on X-Men in my book.
That's exactly right. You have to match the inker,
Mm.
which is why I'll say it for a third time with pleasure. Props to Terry Austin. The guy can ink anybody and make anybody look good. You knew who also was a great inker was Joseph Rubinstein.
Definitely, love him.
Starlin has a tendency towards stiffness and static standard poses, but Rubinstein really livened him up beautifully, made him very lush.
But look how great Cochrane looks here. This is so amazing. This is really like this.
Yeah, no, his
Who did you
stuff.
say was inking him?
Yeah.
Who did you say was? Who'd you
He
say
was
was?
inking himself. No, Dave was inking himself.
But there's a page. If you go forward a couple of pages,
Especially
there's a
that
page in here. I'm pretty sure is inked by Neil Adams.
Oh, wow.
This one here?
No, there's a
That's
splash
Cochrane.
page.
He's the one to rush, but look at this. Look at this.
Yeah. Let's take a moment here. That's
So
something else.
appreciate the beauty of the page. I mean, look at this.
Yeah, that's amazing. This harkens really back to his Legion work. I really love his Legion work.
Close up, broad shot, and then coming into that's beautiful action right there.
Right? Isn't
Absolutely.
it? You can
Very
animate
nicely composed.
as you read it. Oof.
Like you were saying, Dave, just you get the gist. You get the gist of what's going on here.
It's very well done.
Now that is.
Oh, there's
I'm
a
pretty
tree.
sure that's inked by Neil Adams. If you take a close look.
Do you think? We'll have
You
to.
mean like
I will.
particularly in the vision there, right? You can kind of see it
You
in
can
the
see it in Iron Man
Yeah.
in the way the feathering of the inking. It's either inked by Neil Adams or it's actually inked by somebody like either Klaus Janson or probably even Carl Baker at that time, because Carl Baker's early inks were very nice and were much tighter than they became.
Well, look at the
Really learned to
brushwork
loosen up.
around the burst, Iron Man's burst. It's beautiful. That's interesting. So I can see the argument for Adams. Look at all the variation in the line, especially through, as you say, Iron Man's feet coming all the way up. Beautiful. You can really see it in the defining lines of the vision there.
He was trying to show artists that drawing feet is important, you know?
You making a comment on anyone there, Al?
As an homage to Steve Ditko, maybe.
Oh, look at it. Isn't this gorgeous? Look at that bottom panel.
Speaking of Ditko.
Yeah.
Wow.
How can he fight himself, though?
What's that?
How is he fighting himself, man? Wouldn't the world be destroyed right then and there if he was fighting himself via some type of multiversal or time thing? I mean, it can't be with each other. These guys, they're fighting one another if they one and the same. No?
So funny. I remember as a kid reading this and going, "It is all too insane," and looking at that face and going, "Indeed, it is."
I love it, though. It is great artwork, man. I mean,
Dave, will you say something else about? You think? Were you saying that you felt that Kirby kind of ran with this idea with Thanos, or with Darkseid? You said with Darkseid.
No, what I was saying more about is, you see, with Kirby was like, I think his initial version of Kang was someone who thought he was supremely strong, supremely powerful, and everyone was below him. Very much the way Darkseid treats everybody. And I always hated it when they, like, later on, people would go, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do an issue of let's have the Justice League all team up to beat up Darkseid." Darkseid doesn't do that. Darkseid's not a brawler. Darkseid is the master manipulator. He's like, so
as a team, he does as a team do his dirty work.
Yeah, he has other people do it, and it's like, and it, there's appearances like in Forever People when he appeared to them. They were petrified of him. They knew how powerful he was, and they respected that. And whereas
upper right hand corner here is Cochrane evoking Starlin.
Yeah, or Star.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, actually, the bottom left-hand corner, that pose of Kang where he's punching, that's almost a Jim Starlin pose.
But even the look of Mantis, I mean, wow, yo.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a true reverence.
Isn't it?
But I love this storyline because, again, as I can understand, like to be honest, I'd forgotten this, and thank you, Chris, for reminding me, because it wasn't a big thing when I watched the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. It wasn't, it was like, oh, why have you made Mantis like that? Oh well, and I just really blew it off.
My suggestion is that she will come into depth, but I agree it was a little.
But no, the idea here is that conversation she has with Wanda. It's she originally, the swordsman, basically she teamed up with the swordsman, and they were having a relationship, but then she dropped the swordsman because she thought, I've now met other people who are better than him, so I'm just going to drop him for a better guy.
Can you roll back one, Al? Al, speaking to what Dave is talking about, can you roll back one? And here she is, Dave, right? Here are the people that, like, here's the vision. He's not even sure how to understand her.
But what is even more interesting here, and this is again, when people want to have a discussion with me about the Guardians movie, the whole idea of the Celestial Madonna is that Kang identifies one of the two, Wanda or Mantis, to be the Celestial Madonna. And naturally, Wanda says, well, it must be me then, of course. It can't be that prostitute from Vietnam. And it is the prostitute from Vietnam. And this is the brilliant thing here. It's the lowest of the peasants. She is the goddess. And that is so interesting here.
Well, you talk again about Englehart and bringing the current social memes and commenting on them. How more fantastically witty a comment on what we did to the nation of Vietnam than by making the goddess of Vietnam the Celestial Madonna. And
exactly, this is so brilliant. This is really good. This is really subversive. And this is the shit I cannot stand about the current Marvel universe, because it's completely dumbed down, and that's why I'm not watching all these movies here with Eternals and all that crap, because it's completely dumbed down for a stupid audience.
I suspect they'll deepen Mantis, but we'll see.
Hopefully.
I wouldn't hold your breath.
No.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I didn't think the Thor movies had much traction, but they're starting to do something with those characters.
Hopefully, we will see.
It's in the right hands, like I can't see them making a dramatic change to.
I like what is it? Marcus and McFeely did with the Russo brothers. Those 4 movies they did together, they are really good. And then you look at James Gunn, and I said, no, James Gunn is really completely wrong.
Awesome.
Well, not being the Guardians of the Galaxy on screen are so dramatically the light years from the Guardians of the Galaxy as we knew them in the comics.
Absolutely.
But
this also goes back to this idiotic tweet somebody put up and said, look at this Kirby art, looks like shit. I'm so happy we get the better Eternals now in the movie. And you say,
that's Eternals. Better Eternals. Okay, I'll say this shit right here. I fell asleep on that movie not even 15 minutes in. That's the first Marvel movie I've ever fallen asleep on.
You know what's fascinating to me about that is you have Kirby trying to do the New Gods at DC, and we know how that kind of turned out. Maybe he could have used a Roy Thomas to help him, or a Mark Evanier. And then he goes back to Marvel and he's bringing the Eternals to bear. And DC has struggled, I think, to know how to really treat the New Gods. And Marvel has had a hard time really knowing what to do with the Eternals. It's a property, and they understand what Kirby was going for, but they're not sure how to treat it. And
I don't think they understand what he was going for. I think that they just treat it like any other property, and it's like.
Well, I mean, in terms of this notion, the plot notion of them being the original beings that created mutated human superheroes.
And aren't we glad that we don't get a Tom King New Gods movie? Aren't we glad? I mean, after reading Mr. Miracle.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say there was a. I mean, I like Ava as a director and a producer.
Absolutely, no insult. Also, Tom is a nice guy, but they are not the right fit for this material. With the artistic vision, I mean, they have a completely different artistic vision.
I think New Gods could be, if you treated it correctly, it could be a Lord of the Rings.
Absolutely,
it works well enough that DC's been able to integrate it. I mean, the New Gods are now part of that DNA. They've integrated it to that extent. But
no, they've forced it into. They've forced it into. I mean, the characters are so strong.
That's what I mean. They've been able to incorporate it because it's so well conceived.
But they're doing it very ham-fistedly. It's like Darkseid's become almost like a two-dimensional bad guy.
And also, Dave made a great point in one of our earlier podcasts where he said that Darkseid is always in the background. He's the schemer. He doesn't lay a hand on Superman. He doesn't need
to go back to what we talked about at the beginning in terms of pork and swine. DC has often made ham of the material that's available to them. We've seen it time and time again, and we don't really have an answer for that. It's a corporate issue, I suppose, a corporate culture issue, but the material is there. The thing is that Marvel has no incentive to absorb that material because they have enough material of their own, and they've done so many things with DC ideas that DC didn't think of doing. There was a time when Marvel, you used to be able to go between the comics and see how they were reacting to each other, how they were upping the ante on each other. Secret Wars is a perfect example of Marvel trying to up the ante on DC when they found out about a Crisis on Multiple Earths.
And there's also an interesting development. This Mark Cherry, the third guy, they hired to be the liaison between Warner Brothers and DC Comics. He up and left from one day to the next. He's gone. Even the Hollywood Reporter wrote about this. He's just gone.
He's working. Isn't he the guy who went to work for Kanye West?
Well, that's the rumor at the moment. But what an interesting development there.
Who are you talking about, Chris?
Oh, they hired a guy when they had the big reshuffle 2 years ago when they let Danny Dio go and Bob Harris. They hired a guy to be I don't know what his title, vice president marketing something. He was the go-between between Warner Brothers and DC Comics. And less than 2 years in, he left from one day to the next, or he was fired. Nobody knows. He's just gone.
I remember. I'm trying to remember who that was.
This name is Mark Cherry. Mark Cherry. So you can just Google him. This is Cockrum, inked by Joe Giella, which is also very nice.
But who the hell is this in the trench coat, man? What a perv!
Nice. But look how awesome Mantis is here.
Hell yeah!
Formidable.
Kicking some ass.
And Dave Cockrum said she's not wearing any underwear. Of course, that's what he said.
Go back and let's look at the shadows, Al.
There's no old guys here. No, definitely not.
Oh, bro.
Well, that's how Steve Englehart created her.
I mean,
she's
not human, right?
We talked about his run on Batman. We've talked about his run here on the Avengers. He had a very nice run
on Captain America. Captain America
as well. In fact, since you mentioned it, Chris, I think we talked about this in our first conversation. Hero or hoax?
Yeah, great storyline. Storyline.
Then we talk about the multiverse, and we talk about retconning, and we talk about dealing with the implications of various characters. What a masterful story. I remember the first time we saw Bucky, we're like, what just happened here?
And it fits so perfectly, what Englehart did fits so perfectly with the direction they took Captain America in the 1950s. Not only the comic smashing thing, that was also part of it, that was part of the relaunch under Romita, but before that, in the original Captain America comic series, when Bucky was nearly killed and Golden Girl took over, a lot of that fits perfectly in this way. He became a teacher. It fits perfectly in this with what Englehart was going for, that this was not the real Cap, but a Cap fanboy, basically, who got crazy.
And for my money, Ed Brubaker, who looked at that, said, okay, so if we can deal with the 1950s Captain America as Ersatz version who's gone crazy, which they brought into Winter Soldier series, why can't we do that with Bucky? what happened to Bucky's body. He's never been found. And
Absolutely.
it's very difficult, almost a sacrosanct notion of not bringing Bucky back. But if there was a way to bring him back, that was Ace's.
That was cool. And they had a secret love affair with Natasha when they were in the 50s. That was very nicely done. I really like that. That was a very good run on Brubaker's.
So what else? Englehart also. What else can we evoke of Englehart that was so spectacular? Just a great storyteller.
Oh, Doctor Strange. Dr. Strange. He also worked on Dr. Strange.
He also worked on the New Gods, come to think of. Mr. Miracle, in fact.
True. Absolutely true.
With Marshall Rogers. With Marshall Rogers.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's Steve Gerber originally, though, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Say again?
Steve Gerber started that.
What is going on? Why does he have that weapon? I mean, he looks like the devil right there, bro. I love it. What is this?
Okay, talking about John Byrne earlier, and that's why I included John Byrne also. This is his son by marriage.
Oh, okay.
Interestingly enough, it's the arts by Kieran Dwyer with Rick Remender.
Did you say that Kieran Dwyer is John Byrne's son? I missed what you were saying.
Yes, he's John Byrne's son by marriage. He was married to his mother. John Byrne was married to Kieran's mother.
I'll be doggone.
Mm-hmm.
That explains his early work, because you're like, okay, nice.
Mm-hmm. And Tom Brevoort, when I posted this as a quiz, Tom Brevoort did it. He says there's some history, but I'm not the person to talk about it. And I said, okay, I'm not going to press Tom Brevoort on that one.
Can you imagine if you're a comic kid, a nerd, and your mom says, "Yo, this is my boyfriend," and you're the comic, he's like, "Holy shit!" You're like, "Oh my god, fucking the ultimate brag to your friend. Yo, my mom is with all right."
dating the X-Men artist. Well, I mean, that is the coolest thing ever. Then you meet the guy. Okay.
Well, no. Also, hey, can you give me a few drawing tips?
Well, not to mention all the supplies you could need.
I would imagine John was a
story that Dave Sim used to share a studio with come on guys, help me out. Who's that? Dave Sim used to share a studio with very famous artist. I'm totally blanking on his name. But he used to say, I know it's not, I think his name is Dave Sim used to share a studio with a very popular Marvel artist, Gene Day. Sorry.
Oh, Gene Day. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
Gene Day. And Sim, in his early days would be like, I just don't. I'm trying to go for a Barry Windsor Smith hand here, and this is not a Barry Windsor Smith hand. And he said that Gene Day would look at him and go, but it's a really good Dave Sim hand.
Oh, cool. But there is some irony to it, because Gene Day also has a little bit of Barry Windsor Smith in his art.
Oh, sure.
The
studio, that would be a great
first thought.
The studio, Mike Clute.
Okay, we talked about this. This is a little tip to the head to our guest, Jason again.
Yep, and for some odd reason, I'll bring that up.
Hey, put up yes, little pitchy here.
I'm going to bring it up right now because
we've got to end on a plug.
We are.
Yeah, of course, we want to.
A lot of people end that way, Dave, is from what I understand.
Exactly. And I understand Dave
plug.
Dave was so kind on lending a hand to this. But
so identify him. Who are we looking at here? Start from left and go to right. Who are we looking at?
Yeah. Who's the woman? Or who are the women?
I think the second from the left, that She-Hulk, or is?
Oh shit!
That's a very good question.
Right? Parla?
Okay, here we go. And once again, shout out to my cover designer. Dave did a great job here with the cover. Can always praise Dave here for this amazing cover. And
you can always praise me.
Yes, I need you for the next one, mate. I need you for the next one. It's coming soon. And go on Amazon, buy it. It's lost 1 5-star review, not to a mistake of my own, but one of my Twitter followers was blocked by Amazon. That happens sometimes. But Jason left a 5-star review as well. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you, Chris, are we gonna get any of these razors like signed by you or what? What's going on?
Well, maybe we will. We've come to the States once COVID lifts.
Once
COVID lifts.
That's a liability lawsuit waiting to happen.
Absolutely. What do you think we blended out the logo?
I love that logo, by the way, Dave.
Yeah. Dave did a great job here. And Terry Osterhout, who did the photo. And that's the hand of his wife, Liz, who was so kind to hold the razor we ordered.
You know what's interesting is that there's blood on your cover, but that's a clean blade.
No, yeah, but that's we tried several things, and then Dave said I can do this much better, and he did it much better.
No blood on the razor.
It's a
It's
really
really
sharp,
it
it's
looks-
a really
it-
sharp blade. Just if you
exactly.
look at the
It
really
looks-
sharp blade and you flick it, literally all the blood will come off.
Just
Yeah.
smooth, just clear, no remnant.
That's the way it's described in my book anyway. So here you go.
Hey, if it's good enough for Sweeney Todd,
It's all about the flick of the
absolutely.
wrist, brother. If you don't got it, you know what I mean? Ain't gonna
Absolutely. And I had shapes with blades. I had shapes with blades like this, and your heart goes like this when somebody shapes you like this with such a blade. I mean, you get okay. Better not move now. It's scary.
So where's the best place to apply that? I guess it depends on what you're going for. Femoral artery, jugular. Where do you apply that, Chris?
Just across, and you're done.
Come from behind and get them here too. Same
No,
thing.
if you move, okay, I'm right-handed. If you move like this, it goes right across. And there's what's it called? The carotid artery? I can't pronounce it.
Carotid,
Yeah, here you go. That's what it is. Mhm.
regular vein carotid artery. You don't actually have to take the whole throat. If you really
No.
want them to suffer, you just empty it. There's no way to stop it.
Yep.
No, but there's a joke. But there's a joke in the book where the character says, "Well, I met this guy and needed." Well, he said, "Well, basically, are there pictures? You must have looked stunning." And he said, "Yeah, the guy nearly lost his head." And there's this joke in the book, of course.
Well, here's another one for you, Chris. Humor in a jugular vein.
I heard about this. Yeah, that's a good
Does that
one.
mean anything to you? The original Mad
heard
magazine had a stripe down its spine.
Oh yeah, you're saying So you're completely right. You're completely right.
Harvey Kurtzman.
Yes, you're completely right. Kurtzman is a complicated guy for me.
Well, you evoked Kriegstein, and I wanted to mention to you, his artwork is, of course, beautiful. And
I wrote a long article about it.
Kurtzman ended up being mostly a visual plotter, but his visual storytelling is outstanding. And he's not. I don't.
Very different from Kriegstein, because Kurtzman is very much in the cinematic. Very much in the cinematic.
Unsung innovator, I think, of visual storytelling.
He's also very much in the cinematic vein. Kriegstein isn't, and they're very different in their approach, which is very fascinating.
I think it's funny that some of these guys, as we've moved on in time, and the new readers coming in aren't familiar with them, have no interest in seeing old artwork, so they're not current.
That's the language that we're speaking, though. I mean, Jason mentioned it at the beginning. As a young person, you look at the comic strips and you start to get the sense of it. But it's a language, it's an idiom, and we're talking about the people. Kriegstein, definitely, Kurtzman, Kirby, obviously, who forged that language for us. We're still speaking it. I mean, John Byrne's career is largely based on his absorption of his influences.
Absolutely.
Right, but I think only because of Disney now owning and having the cinematic universe, it's probably the only real reason that we're still remembering, or we will still remember 5-10 years from now, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, because their names will keep cropping up on movies. Even on the TV shows where the creators get a mention, often those creators don't get a mention until the end credits. So people
saw
don't
that on
see
the
them.
Daredevil show. I was looking for him on the Daredevil show.
Well, on the Daredevil show, they never credited Wally Wood.
No, they didn't.
They didn't, which is insane. It's insane. Literally everything that you think of as Daredevil is pretty much down. Most of it, anyway, is down to what Wally Wood designed and wrote. So
the whole Matt Murdock. I see Matt Murdock as a Wally Wood. Progression of images.
And Jason just thanked us on Twitter, so shout out to Jason again for joining us. He says he had a great time. So here we go again. Thanks to our guest, Jason Henderson, for joining us today.
And just as a reminder for folks that may have missed it, you can follow Jason on Twitter right there, Jason D. Henderson. And, of course, check out the book website at Castle Bridge Media.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
You should have done that on there, bro.
It's the smell.
All right, so guys, it's been great, man. So, where we diving next?
Don't we have a guest next week? Don't we have a guest in 2 weeks?
Oh yeah, in 2 weeks. Because I had interviewed him recently on the Comic Crusaders podcast, and now homie loves it. He's dying to talk to everybody here. Pete Dory.
Oh, Pete. Yeah,
man. Pete himself, man. He was telling me stories. I'm like, holy damn, you grew up with this was the clique you grew up with, man. And then from the get, I'm like, wow. And you got you're telling me about you guys' experience, like you, Dave. That UK. When that book came out, and that everybody remembers that certain day and year when that Marvel book came out with the multiple stories, and in the UK, these is
1970.
Yeah, the dude. Is it really that much of a memorable day for y'all, huh?
Well, no, I mean, it wasn't like by 1970, I'm referring to when Marvel UK first really set up office in the UK and started their own line of reprints, which was The Mighty World of Marvel.
Yeah, that's what he showed me one of the copies, like one of the early issues that he had in his hand. I'm like, oh damn, look at that.
But actually, as early as 4 or 5 years before that, in the very early days of Marvel, Marvel had already found publishers to reprint their material in the United Kingdom, but actually inside other comics. And because British comics are different sized and bigger, they would chop up pages. So they would, and because on a comic page in the UK, we were used to like 9, 10, even 12 panels a page.
A1 size,
Yeah, so no, they were not A1 size. It's literally like what we call A4 size, which is
A4, but large
heavy metal size. If you think like a bit bigger than heavy metal. So what would happen is you'd literally have like 2 pages of Jack Kirby's of X-Men cut up and rearranged on a single page, and a splash page might be reduced down to one big panel.
Oh damn!
Jeez.
So
interesting.
Yeah,
interesting.
I think you might know more about this than me, Dave, but I think when Kaluta and Lee were redoing the Starstruck pages, they were expanding images and stuff like that just to fill out the larger size they were going for.
Right. Yeah. It's. I mean, it's been done in the past, and I think most people just don't notice it. If you do it well, people just don't notice. Yeah.
I think about the early Marvel TV cartoons where, you had a Kirby image and they'd move the arm, or, they take
motion
a picture.
Comics, bro. Motion comics. That's what the first motion comics. That's what I call them.
Well,
I love those, though. It's so cheesy.
I think there's a cartoon show that Alex Toth did most of the sort of production artwork for called, I think it was just called The Angel or Space Angel. And they actually filmed real mouths.
Space Ghost. You mean?
Right. Mm-hmm. No, it was called Space Angel.
Okay.
But he's from the UK. He's gonna have it so different.
Designed by Alex Toth. I think, and they would take these stills from Alex Toth's artwork, but they would actually have a real mouth doing the talking. They'd actually superimpose a real mouth on it.
That must have been some freaky shit, bro. At that time,
yeah, it looked really freaky.
I would imagine. I mean, back then you guys had heroin and other crazy hallucinogens. Could you imagine seeing a cartoon with human mouths? You're like, yo, what the fuck? This is good shit, bro.
No, it's a 6-year-old.
But as an adult, there was some adults watching.
Alex Toth and Kirby and a bunch of others also worked in American animation. Toth, I think, did do Space Ghost. He also
he did designs for Space Ghost, yeah, and he did the designs for the Fantastic Four animated show.
And Kirby worked on He-Man, I think, and he worked on several.
Jack, well, not only did he work on He-Man, He-Man was originally supposed to be a Jack Kirby concept, and talks broke down between him and Mattel. And what they did is they took all the ideas they'd been coming up with him and just did He-Man and never credited Jack Kirby for it.
Here we go again with creators' rights.
Wow.
You know, it is interesting that Kirby would end up there because he started out, and when he was very young, he started out working for Fleischer, doing in-betweens for Popeye cartoons. Decided that he wanted to have more of a hand in the work, I think.
Well,
but he was a quick artist. Kirby was fast.
Yeah, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's, you know, he was always, he had the stories, he had the ideas, he had the experiences that he channeled into his work. Very bright man. And again, he was a very modest man. Like, and I think this is one of the things why, like, you know, a lot of people like would probably have just at a comic convention walked past Jack Kirby, not even noticing him, because he didn't throw himself around. He was the
one time I met him in a room full of people, it was his actually his suite at San Diego Con. There were quite a few, you know, notable people there. I don't recall him saying very much. I recall him standing there very quietly observing the scene, of course having things to say, but I remember him as being very he used the word modest, very unassuming, you know. Knew who he was, knew his place.
Jealous. You guys got to see him. You didn't get to see him, right?
No.
So at least two of us didn't, because damn, I'm jealous. I wish I had
the first time I got to meet Jack Kirby several times, and the first time I walked in to one of the San Diego hotels, and I'm walking on. I looked over and I'm like, fuck, there's Jack Kirby, and he was standing on the stairs. He was like standing halfway up the stairs. I think it was the DoubleTree. And there was quite a few people around him, and his wife Roz was there, and I for a second I thought there was an opening, so I walked up to the bottom of the stairs, and then Frank Miller just comes out of nowhere and goes straight over to Jack Kirby and starts talking to him, and Roz saw me walk up and then stop, and I sort of backed off. I was talking to Frank Miller. I'm not going to bother him and Frank Miller. She walked down the stairs. She came over. She goes, "Hi, who are you?" And I explained, and I said what I did and everything. She goes, "Oh, okay. Would you like to meet Jack?" I was like, "Yeah, but he's busy right now." She goes, No. She led me up. She interrupted his conversation with Frank Miller and said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, Frank. Jack, you have to meet Dave."
Oh, I fucking love
Well, you know, he was like that. Kirby and Roz were both like that, because people would go to, I mean, Mark Avenir, that's one of the ways he got to meet Jack Kirby, is they would go to their houses. They would write them letters, and they might get invited over for a lunch or an afternoon.
I had lunch at their house. It was like, and I got some war stories. I got some, we talked.
So you know the whole thing about Roz signing pieces of art and books in Jack's name?
No way, really? So there might be some false Jack Kirby signatures out there.
I think she did sign a couple of things after his death. Yes,
but she perfected his version, his preferred version of his signature. She had very good penmanship, and she could sign. So one of the ways
she inked some of his work as well.
One of the ways she helped him by doing that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, I remember it was.
She had input on challenges in the first couple of issues.
Yeah, I remember it was a couple of years after. It was like 2 years after Jack's death, and I was in I think it was the Hyatt Hotel at San Diego, and I'm walking along, and admittedly I'm dragging my feet a little bit, but it's very crowded, and somebody in a wheelchair ran into the back of my legs, and I turned around, and it's Roz Kirby with Mark Evanier, and Roz goes to me, goes like, so Jack's dead, so you're not going to give me a hug anymore?
Oh,
cool. Oh, very cool.
And I was just like, oh my god, it's just like, so yeah, she was just wonderful. We just gave her a big hug, and we talked for a while. And
you know, one of those kind of like what the hell moments. The first convention I ever went to, and I'm talking about, I might have been 15 at the time, 14 or 15. I went to a thing called BayCon in San Francisco, and I'm standing there looking through, you know, the bins. To me, it was paradise. I was buying my comic books in pharmacies. You know, at that point, there weren't really any comic shops, and it was beautiful to see all those back issues. And I'm standing there looking at this. I stopped at this booth because there was an oil painting of Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck. It was the strangest thing, and I'd never seen one of those before. I'd seen some of the covers, but this was like not a cover for a comic book. It was like a fine art painting. And there was a very, very tall older gentleman standing there kind of examining it. And the dealer came up and he goes, "Oh, yes, well, that's $3,000 if you're interested, because this is an original oil painting recreation of one of the Uncle Scrooge covers by Karl Barks." And the the gentleman standing to my left was like, "Yes, I painted that."
I love it.
Very nice.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's a cool story.
How did you feel? You like, holy shit, right? The hell? I love it.
Well, one tries to keep their composure, but just kind of, find something to discuss.
Oh, that's so great, man. All right.
In terms of that, I think the most.
No, I was just gonna say that Chris and I need to have that type of wow moment. We don't have it.
You're not getting it now.
Hey,
Al, I think I mentioned to you that
we live vicariously through your memories. Here we go.
Hey,
the hardest thing I had in terms of my self-composure in the comics industry, I was a big Alan Moore fan. I was a big fan of but when I was a kid, and I'm talking about the same period, I used to love to read Mike Kaluta's The Shadow. I loved Bernie Wrightson on Swamp Thing. But
Bernie also worked on The Shadow. Bernie also worked on The Shadow.
Mike Kaluta on The Shadow. And
Great
so
series.
when I went to Tundra, I was actually assigned both of their books are assigned. I chose to be the editor of Captain Stern by Bernie, and we were doing Galactic Girl Guides, but Starstruck. So when Kaluta and Elaine Lee came to Tundra for me to meet them to formalize, that was a difficult moment for me, because what I wanted to do, as Dave would like us to do, is I wanted to get down on my knees and go, "Oh, I've been a fan of yours since I was for 20 years. I've loved your work. I've loved it.
Not worthy."
I used to speak out. I used to search for those issues of Starstruck, which could be hard to find.
Great.
And so to work with them, I was just like, well, I'm a professional, been a professional for years. This is just a dream come true. It was a real delight to work with them.
I mean, I bet the guys love to hear that. I mean, from professional to professional, it's great. Why not?
Well,
Starstruck was such a great magazine.
When I resigned from Tundra, my last function before I drove across the United States with my family to get to Seattle was I went to Bernie Wrightson's very famous Halloween party. He had an annual Halloween party, and that year we actually stayed at his house. And you got to meet these people in a way where, like we talked about, Al, Bernie Wrightson for years was having trouble with his fingers because of this incredible eczema that had developed, and he couldn't figure out. He tried everything he could do, steroids, lotions. He could not figure out what was going on with his hand, and it was interfering with his work because his hand would be very cracked. I remember him talking to me about how he would be like, hurry up when his hand felt better so he could continue working, because when that flared up, he really had a hard time just sitting down to his work. And what it turned out, according to what he said when he finally got the right dermatologist, it turned out the thing that was causing the eczema on his fingers was the nickel plating on his brushes.
Oh, wow.
That's crazy.
Shoot. That's so crazy.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
When you get good brushes, when you get really nice brushes, often they come sort of metal and
nickel plated often. So what he ended up doing ultimately is putting clear nail polish over them. But that really interfered with his joy in inking his own work for years, because it was a chore, and he knew something was going to happen. He didn't realize that that's what it was, but he had this.
Was going to wear finger condoms instead, and still
something like that. Yeah.
Work gloves.
That might have been prophylactic, but when you have that outbreak and your hand is basically cracked and open.
Yeah. Oh damn! I cannot imagine the poor guy, bro. He gave us still great work, even though he was suffering like that. That's crazy.
Of course, I always, of all of his great work that I ever think of all the great Bernie Wrightson work, I always think of his Frankenstein.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great stuff, man. Iconic.
All
right, guys.
Vision of the work.
So we're gonna have Pete Dory in 2 weeks, right? We're gonna go into some rabbit holes in history. Since Chris sent pictures this week, G, why don't you put something together that we could talk to Dory about?
I work real well. If you give me a subject, I'll research the hell out of it and help you out. I wasn't sure what to do here.
No way. What do you think for the next show? What do you want to talk about, guys?
Well, Pete Dory does his own comic, which is about Stan and Jack.
You're breaking
That's what I was
so
thinking.
bad. I can't. What
No, he wants to say something about. He said his book is about Stan and Jack. I was thinking the same thing. We should do something about Stan and Jack.
Yes. Okay. So let's do a Stan and Jack because he has that fantastic comic book. It's amazing. I think you guys have a trip. You guys definitely got to check it out. Don't you worry. And you're gonna see. Okay, that's a great topic actually, because in line with what we've always talked about, and then just to see his take on it, and you know, then there's a very humorous take on it that I think you guys would appreciate the hell out of. It's poetic, especially when he does the Stan Lee rhetoric. It's like, dude, where were you digging? I mean, he was going deep on the Stan Lee verbiage, if you will. Very funny. I loved it. So okay, we'll do that. So there you go. Bring up some Stan Lee stories, some Jack Kirby stories that maybe do you think that would be a wonderful fit as the comic books narrative? Because that's the one thing that Pete explained in our podcast. Is like, you know, he said he got a message for someone on social media talking about, why would you do a book on this? No one needs this. Like, who fuck you? Right?
Well, why did Michael Gabon write Cavalier and Clay? I mean,
you do what you do as a creator.
You know, Robert Mayer wrote Super Folks, which, in my opinion, is an extremely influential work. And almost as soon as it was published, he disowned it. Still doesn't really care for it. But it's a clever little, it's a doodle, but it's a clever little play on the subject. And I think, as we've talked about a few times, Alan Moore was clearly influenced by that. I certainly think Frank Miller was influenced by it, not in the same way. But this whole notion of bringing the metaphysical commentary, using the terms of we're talking now about the genre of superheroes, not the medium of comics, but to use the tropes and the implications of the genre to comment on the genre. We see it everywhere today. I mean, that's the postmodern movement.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
All right, so good shot on that day. That's exactly going to be the homework, and we're going to have fun.
I don't think we need to do too much homework talking about Stan and Jack, but
no, but I definitely wanted to see his. I wanted to talk about see his take on it. You know,
we have a chance to do the dark side and then the lighter side.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna have so much fun for this. In 2 weeks. Get ready, folks.
Before we go on that subject, as a homework subject, Stan and Jack. Ultimately, friends?
Oh, I would say more.
I know, so I'm not saying.
All right, you see, I'm not gonna. I would say not for me.
And you know the reasons why, right, Dave?
Oh God, well, one day we're gonna have to have a drunken chat with Dave and get him a little bit more loosey goosey.
I'll be happy to pour that one. We have to be in the same room. Two words for you, Dave.
I'm just on
Flashy Funkman.
I'm just on water and coffee today, so no loose lips.
Flashy Funkman. Those are my 2 words for you, Dave.
Yeah, don't worry. We're gonna have to promise to do one of these with a couple of drinks. We'll do it a little bit later in the day for Greg.
I'm sorry, it's probably Funky.
It's Funky Flashman. It's Funky Flashman.
Sorry.
All right.
It's still 2 words. You were not wrong. It's still 2 words.
It's not Funky Flashman?
It's Funky Flashman, but it doesn't matter. You said it 2 words, so you can say Flashman Funky. It doesn't really matter because you said 2 words. So it's still correct.
But the point was Funky Flashman. Funky Flashman.
Yeah, I know.
That's my 2 words about Stan.
And it was also very hurtful to Roy Thomas.
Houseboy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was very hurtful. It was very hurtful to Roy Thomas.
Oh, there's an issue of the Comics Journal. I can't remember which number. I'm going to say in the 50s, but the back cover is Jim Shooter, Stan Lee, and between them is Roy Thomas with knives in his back.
Damn.
So, just one last thing then on this subject. Are you all familiar with the fact that Jack Kirby is now credited as co-writer on Fantastic Four.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with that one. That was a big win, bro. That was a big little discussion when that finally happened.
But even number
That's a big
one,
win.
even issue 1.
Oh, that's a big win.
It's just crazy that it takes so much pushing and hard work on behalf of people, just for others and legends like that, just to get the credit that they're due. Like, the companies that don't give credit to the legends, be ashamed of yourselves.
Whereas Dave makes the good point that, on the one hand, the fans are going to have to put those names forward. On the other hand, are the fans remembering who those people are? As we were talking about.
Fans, I mean,
the Eternals thing is a great one there, right? Because here goes fans, like what Chris said, talking shit about Kirby's Eternals, talking about this movie's like the greatest thing since White on Rice. Like, you guys got this shit so ass backwards.
Just scratching the surface there. It does remind me, though, when it comes to the Fantastic Four, we talked about this at the top of the show, too, about the migration of stories. We talked about Sofia Strange becoming Sylvia Faust. Kirby was working on Challengers of the Unknown. And I don't think we're happy with DC culture. DC is such a strange editorial culture. Came back to Marvel because Marvel needed him. There was work to be done. Let's get this going. Do you have any ideas? And he goes, well, I was working on this Challengers of the Unknown idea. But I'm thinking we can make that a little more operatic, a little more super heroic, and that's the Fantastic Four.
I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, because I think that both Stan and Goodman both liked Challenges of the Unknown and probably actually said, hey, let's do, give us something like Challenges of the Unknown.
Right. The ultra science that was very popular in the 60s, Stan even going so far as to put magnets on Cap's shield or roller skates on Iron Man. The super science of the 60s, which turned Flash into Barry Allen from, instead of it being heavy water with Jay Garrick, it's a lightning flash and a loud of chemicals.
Well,
you have this science, as Alan Moore called them, the science heroes.
Well, don't forget the Fantastic Four took 3 issues before they put costumes on them.
Absolutely.
Oh, they were naked, bro.
Yeah.
No, they
naked.
But there's a theory about that, because they were very hesitant to do that with the costumes because they were distributed by DC Comics. They didn't want to rock the boat that they were now doing superhero comics, so they did it very clandestine in the beginning.
I think there's a lot of things there. I think that there's also the possibility that if you look at Fantastic Four #1 and it possibly being 2 stories that was supposed to be in 2, it might have actually been supposed to be in Tales to Astonish or something, Tales of Suspense, as filler stories, fillers.
Which brings us back
that's how Spider-Man started. That's how Spider-Man started.
At that time, Marvel was distributed through the same distributor as DC. In fact, DC was distributing them at the beginning, so they could only put out so many titles. They were limited to how many titles they could put out.
8.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, there was there was a certain amount of fear.
Yeah, that's also what a lot of things we can also talk about that in greater detail at some other point. People get wrong about Atlas. Atlas was not a comic book publisher. Atlas was the distribution company Martin Goodman had started in order to distribute his own books. And when the comic book mark folded, the Marvel moniker goes back to the 40s actually, because Stan Lee called the superhero comic books in the 40s, and then after the war, when they brought back Captain America, they continued Captain America, they continued Namor, and they began to brand these comic books as Marvel magazines, I believe, or Marvel periodicals or something.
Well,
the romance books.
I think the Human Torch's first appearance was Marvel Comics #1.
No, but that was a Marvel Comics. But they had Captain America, and it was it said Marvel Comics on the cover as an imprint in the 40s.
Briefly,
because but that was the way for Stan to brand this as Marvel Comics very early on, because he wanted this separate from the romance line.
Right.
There's such an interesting backstory there, and also we talked about Joe Manili being the guy, and he had Matt Baker there, and then those 2 guys unfortunately died early, and then he brought Kitty and Kirby back. It's so fascinating, this story.
Yes, we had that. We could just repeat
talked
that
about
podcast.
this.
Which speaks to Goodman's desire to hold the name Marvel at all costs, which speaks to, companies getting into debt with their distributors or their printers and having to make certain deals. Gold Key got into debt with Western Publishing, so Western Comics just took over the imprint, and they owned it anyway. They've been printing it for years, so they just put their logo on.
Yeah.
Fascinating history of comics, because you have this these strange doppelgangers as you go through and it's all because of the economics of it, as we know. I mean, the whole thing started, as you like to say, Chris, with Max Gaines going, Eastern color presses are idle. I wonder what we could do with those old plates. Could we print them up again and fold them differently? And the birth of an industry. And remember, when Gaines walked away from his interest in All-American Comics, they gave him a cool $1 million.
Damn.
Yeah, and he went and started church comics, Bible stories. Yay! That was going to be great. Exactly, that was going to be a great hit.
The problem with picture stories of the Bible, which I'm sure sold well, and it's iconic for a lot of reasons.
Well,
it's so badly illustrated.
It didn't sell. It didn't sell. That was the problem.
There's a very, very, very well-known magazine, and I'm not going to mention its name, that would change printer literally every 2 issues because they had to find another printer because they owed the last printer.
They couldn't pay the printer.
Yeah, and is that a Quality Comics title?
No.
Damn, really? That's insane.
Yeah, no, you all know the magazine very well. But it was...
Oh, yes, thank you.
I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm not going to name
Well,
it.
that's how Donenfeld got in on just to go back to the beginning, Superman is a perfect example of the creators' rights issues, and Donenfeld and Major Wheeler Nicholson is a perfect example of a innovative, perhaps ambitious publisher getting in too deep with their printer.
Exactly. Donenfeld stole DC Comics and National from under him. Which is so fascinating. Kind of.
Yeah, true.
The funny thing is, there's a long story. He sent him on a holiday, and then he made him default on his loan, and he canceled his loan. And there's that moment, the bankruptcy court, which also Harry knew that the judge awarded him the company. So he got this way he got National Comics, and DC Comics was a joint venture between him and Major Wheeler.
They never, it was too early. It's too early in copyright law to bring it to the point. But you have, not only are they
table this discussion for another podcast. And let's
we should.
The properties.
Let's come to an end.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to get into this. I like this because this is where we got to talk about this whole publishing history. It is interesting. So we will get into that topic. So after Pete Dory, I think let's revisit this and really dive in.
Dave knows a lot about the inroads and the outroads of publishing, Dave?
More than I do.
Yeah, I'm sure he does.
More than I want to.
So let's do it, people. Everybody, thanks for tuning in.
Okay.
It's Merry Sunday. I appreciate it. Please tune in 2 weeks. We're going to have another guest for episode 51. And then episode 52, we're going to revisit this bad boy. All right? Because it's going to be an amazing conversation. I appreciate everyone. So, of course, make sure to follow us all over the socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagrams, International Comics Crusaders, Comic Crusaders. Follow Dr. G all over Facebook, right? That's your preferred platform, right? And then you got guys. Dave everywhere, Chris. So thank you, everyone. Hasta la próxima. Next Sunday. Later, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.